nobody would blame you. Let me put it that way.
So what usually happens at the workshops?
The workshops are actually better, more fun, because that's what your definition of fun is, right? But so the board will we've got like 3 presentations. We're going to work through these really quick and then adjourn, and then go right into workshop. And in the workshop, these 3 will be presentations and conversation. Actually, all 3 will be fairly interesting. So the board will actually interact with one another, ask questions. They'll ask questions of us. So it's an opportunity to have more open dialogue. Yeah. So it'll be fun. Hey, Jeff.
Hello, how you this
We'll be
fine
back at
day?
7. Look at that.
For fine evening, I should say.
Hi,
Good
how are
job.
you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, I'm good.
I think you might be flying solo tonight. Your buddies came and had dinner, and then
Okay.
that's the end for them. So know that this was so long because we have quite a few presentations. So everything knows
Okay.
So there's like a time, like 9 o'clock or whatever, where don't feel bad.
Okay. I have 2 tests tomorrow, so I think I'll try to be out by 9-ish. But
Yes,
Dr.
definitely.
Tresson said it would be interesting.
It should be
So-
interesting. Hopefully you enjoy it. Yeah. You know what we talked about at dinner? It was Tegan and Jalen.
And the SBI just
Together.
time to catch up.
Oh, yeah, for you guys to go to for like a half day.
That would be so cool.
Right, you could host each other.
Yeah.
We should set it up for this winter. So let's
Yeah,
do that. Let's
yeah.
figure it out.
That would be so
I think it's so
cool.
fun.
Yeah.
So-
I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, it's good. Was it?
Go to the other one, this one's full. Just letting you know.
Depends on how much of an emergency it is.
No, but say you can't, sorry, that's all.
They're worth the cannoli. They're worth it, yeah. Oh, the Ritter Rabbit Bowl is really fantastic.
I was telling Karen, yeah, I mean, it's like, you don't have an ability to, you said you don't have insurance on it, so you're gonna, are you gonna just plan ahead, just keep going and hope that
So I told,
it doesn't blow?
we're gonna,
Because I'm more concerned it's gonna blow while you're there. That's
no,
what-
this is the thing, this is interesting, so this one doesn't have an ice cap on it, so when it erupts, it'll just be magma.
Okay.
And
Hot
it's,
magma.
but it's far enough from a lot of the tourist areas that
Right.
it won't affect it.
But I thought the
If
Blue
it-
Lagoon area was one that they had, that was part of that organized.
It is closed,
Okay.
but, so if it erupts on land, it's not gonna be an issue, because it's not ice cap, but if it erupts in the water, then it's gonna
Steam
steam
up.
magma and steam, yeah. And so in 2010, when there was all those issues with flying,
Yeah.
that was because it was an ice cap volcano.
So all that.
So I've like learned.
Water vapor. Look at you. I know. She's a volcanist at this point, so.
Never mind. Because it.
Yeah, I know,
So
we don't-
much that it like, it doesn't make financial sense.
Yeah.
I never.
The only time I do it is if it's a big ticket and it's the winter. Like, I will do that for the flights.
Oh,
Were you interviewed by Mr. Burns?
Yeah. I wouldn't either.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, I remember that. He was to our bio class.
Everybody's done it. We have the two colors, it's a case by case basis, where you're like, what's the risk? And then, no.
But it's funny, I've just read so many articles around it. No, it's okay. But even in August, there was one that was flown very touristic, so it's just like, it's a normal, it's not land boys and fire.
Right, I know, I was gonna say, you gotta kind of plan on that when you're going to Orlando as a environment.
So we're doing the meeting first and then the
We
workshop?
have, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we have to do this in the meeting. And then we'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I just stayed for those.
Casual.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
The whole meeting. Well, when he's talking about it, I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, right, I was gonna say, are you
Exactly. Yes. Greenhouse in the back for the winter.
It was really a great summer. That's really fun. I could just Google.
Yes, well, that's just gonna be ritual, and that's my final, that's what we're at. We just have to keep saying, over and over, we were negotiating the TPA, not the end. You know, so what's that? Okay. One, two, three. Everybody here? There, we're good? Now, we need, yeah, we have to do this one, so we're, item 4B, consideration of purchase of real estate. I believe Dr. Philpott would like to read this.
Should we skip the 4A?
Oh, first reading. That's the first reading.
Because I would like to hear from you guys how that meeting was.
Yeah.
Okay, so, we have, first reading of revisions to board policies. We recommend revisions of new policies below have been reviewed by the Board of Education's attorney to make sure they comply with the state law, the Open Meetings Act, and the revised school code. The board's policy committee has also reviewed these recommendations. This will be considered as the first reading of these policies. These policies will be brought before the board again at the December 12th meeting, the second reading and consideration. And that's policy 2000.01, admission and enrollment, resident students. Policy 2000.07, health and safety, epinephrine, auto injectors, EpiPens, and opioid antagonists, physical examinations and screenings. Policy 3000.03, instruction, homebound instruction. Policy 4000.02, employment considerations, discrimination, and harassment. Policy 4000.04, evaluations, discipline, and discharge, resignations, performance evaluation. Policy 4005, other matters of employment mandatory reporting. Policy 5000.03, purchasing state, federal grants and awards. Policy 5000.07, risk management. Policy 5000.12, use of electronic signatures. Policy 6000.02, safety and security. Policy 7000.12, school visitors. Policy 7000.13, engagement in outside organizations. Policy 8000.03, Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504. Policy 8000.07, discrimination and harassment. And Policy 8000.09, digital communications, student and staff. So, we don't have we just have a reading, right? So, I guess I can open it up. Yeah, are there any comments or questions for the policy committee members? Or maybe do you want to kind of talk through just briefly what, if there's anything that's
I don't know if
beyond
maybe
word
to
difference?
the policy committee can help me on that. It is important to realize that Miller Johnson is our policy provider. They provide a series of updates really semi-annually. This particular update was from June. So we processed it as a cabinet. We bring our recommendations forward to the policy committee, and now we get a couple of readings to make them official policies of the board. So we did have a good, thorough discussion with the policy committee last week, I believe, and went through all of them and recommend the changes that are outlined in the memo that was received by the Board of Education.
In our materials for today, I didn't see the actual policies with the markup on them. They weren't in Word docs.
And so you didn't see the memo at all?
All I saw, when I pulled, the only document was this document.
This is it.
So I thought we were going to actually see the changes today.
So a lot of them, you know, minor changes.
That's what I was wondering.
There were some new policies, for example, were codified signatures.
That's exciting. It's important. It's 2023. Okay.
the language, just making sure we're.
You know, as long as we can, just have it available to us before the second reading.
I have it in the board packet, so why it didn't make it on, I don't know. I'll make sure that Judy gets that to, we make sure she sends that back out so everybody can take a look. We can put, assuming everybody's taking a look, get us any questions that you have. To Nancy's point, a lot of this is just cleanup, and additions to, a lot of like the harassment stuff. A lot of the harassment language is new based upon how the laws have been changed and so forth. So they're just designed to make sure that our language is consistent with.
Yeah, interesting if we added pregnancy status to almost all the harassment, the civil rights ones, so that must have changed or been enumerated in the law, so.
Can we add this markup into the minutes of this meeting? That way then it's a record.
Make sure you all see it.
Yeah, then we can look at it, and that still gives us, it would show up in the consent agenda, right, for the December meeting. So that would still, if anybody has any issues, we can pull it out of consent and then talk about it. So,
This came out from the two policy committee from a request, which I copied, followed through during our meeting.
I'm gonna, with your permission, I can email them right now, the document.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I don't think it's a big deal because we've kind of talked through it. It'll be, if we include it with the minutes of this meeting, then it's a public document. It'll be out there again, and we can pull it out of consent meeting too.
You can forego the first reading too, Carl, I mean, which we've done in the
I was
past.
gonna say, Shroom said you can forego it. Yeah, like you only need one.
That's been our standard practice too, so.
Oh, okay.
I do have a question.
So,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so essentially, the second reading then would be part of consent as well, right? So we would, but if we get to that meeting in December and anyone wants to talk about it, we'll just move it out of consent and we'll handle it with a regular resolution. Right? Yeah, okay.
And one question, I know these are all recommended by the Miller Johnson guys, and that's how it started off. But are there any that you as a policy committee wanted to add or change from the committee itself? And to, in the recent light of, some activity by some of the fans of Evans, was there any policy that we need to update at all, or are current policies sufficient?
Well, so the policy committee really just looked at these groups, but I know after coming from, the MSD meeting, I talked to Rick a bit about, some discussion of other policies that we have, so the policy committee has the opportunity, to bring forward. And we did, one of the policies, we changed the wording, so, we typically use the recommendations for our attorney as a starting point. But over the course of the years, we have either questioned or changes if we didn't necessarily make sense to us. But I would welcome really any board member if you think we are missing a policy. And the one that came to my mind is there are many districts now that have policies on the use of FAI. We put some of those before we were on. And so, we certainly have the ability to get policies listed. I do think it's helpful to say that there's two schools of thoughts on policies. And MASB seems to always feature the NOLA philosophy, which is
Policy everything.
Use policy everything, which then means, Neola has a fabulous business. Yeah.
They have-
Have you seen, I was gonna say, their binders are literally like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then say you pay for a change policy. Our philosophy has been, we don't
Spell out everything.
We don't spell everything out, and we talk about things being consistent with law, so that when law changes, we let restructure all of our policies. Now, the administrative procedures that change.
updates, go to conferences, and I think that's a good example.
Yeah.
Then absolutely bring those forward, let us know, we'll add it to our list of updates that we get from Miller Johnson, bring that to the committee. And then if there's something that they don't have, we will take that to Kevin and ask him, what do you have as it relates to this, and what do you recommend?
What do you recommend? I was gonna say, yeah.
And Rich, from your side, while you and Christine were working with the administration about the recent thing, to see like what the policies we had were sufficient?
Yeah, absolutely, because we handle that through the code of conduct.
Okay,
Student code of
so
conduct
there's nothing
addresses
there. Okay.
outside activities. Yes.
Yeah, a good example, and it just so happened to be in the June recommendation, is through our, and we'll talk about this next month, but our safety security assessment. It was identified that we need a visitor policy, explicit in our policy book, so June, we got the recommendation from Miller Johnson. Todd Gilovich has been working in tandem with our administrators in our cabinet, and we've recommended that policy. So that's one way. All of our work is always diving into policy, how it supports the work that we're doing. So there's different ways in which it comes to us, and yes, like Rich said, we're always looking to your learning as well.
Yeah, when we went to Miller, it actually slimmed down what our policy was that we didn't develop on our own. I mean, it was an interesting process because we looked at Neola and we looked at Miller, and we're all like, yeah, go that way. Let's try that. And their language is clearer. And it is helpful. Like what I've done sometimes when I see an area of policy, I'll shoot it over to him and say,
Do we have this?
is this covered somewhere? And it's we covered it here. So it's like, so I think it's really helpful to just know, do we have coverage? And we may not need to make it explicit, but the question is, can we point to something that says that applies in this situation? So yeah, that's been my strategy when I see that, is just shoot it over to Rick and just shoot it to Miller. Okay. Great.
Okay, you all have that. Sorry about that.
Okay. So that takes us to 4B, the purchase of real estate property. And as I was saying, Dr. Philhart has volunteered to read this resolution.
Okay. Whereas the school district is able to purchase the following 3 real properties along Livermore Road, in which property is given to school district's use in the school on its site, which purchases are to be expressly contingent upon the school district closing on all 3 properties simultaneously. Civil number 88-20-20-111-41, common noun as 5874, Troy, Shea, Civil 88-20-10-111-02, common noun as 5856, Livermore, Troy, Shea, Civil number 88-20-10-111-03. Whereas the school district has negotiated a formal purchase agreement which will be substantially smaller for all 3
Resolution by Dr. Stelbart, supported by Dr. Wilson. Okay, any comments or questions on this?
So just to clarify, so it would be the purchase of the 3 properties, for the $2.2 million. And then that would be offset by the sale of, the Tallman property, for a little less than, for a minimum of 400, but potentially more depending on how many developable lots are on that property.
He's willing to purchase.
Yes, there will be four different purchase agreements at closing. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just think that the way Patel described it is not the way that I understand it. So it's not, he has to purchase at least, it's purchasing the Tolman property. There are at least 4 developable, so for no less than 400, but it could potentially be more if there are more lots that can be developed.
Correct.
But he's buying the whole lot.
He's buying a portion.
He's only buying the
He's
whole lot.
buying the frontage back 250 feet.
But the point is, he's buying, that doesn't change whether.
That does not change, no.
If he can
But
build 3 houses or 5 houses.
I'm protecting he tells me he can do 4 lots there, and if he can do 5 or 6 because of something I don't know, maybe we're gonna.
He'll get more.
If he only chooses to put 1 on there,
We still get rid of it.
Yeah, okay.
Good. Other questions?
In the purchase agreement, it only shows 2 properties, one right.
so this is a draft because there's gonna be 3 different purchase agreements.
Okay.
Each will have a different Sidwell number, and an address, and a purchase price.
Okay.
So this is
So this is
illustrative,
not-
this
it's
is
just an example.
This is a draft of what
Okay.
all of them will look like.
Okay.
Okay. We're ready for, well, we don't need a roll call. No, just all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed, say no. Thank you. Resolution passes. Thank you, Mr. West. Progress. Okay, and with that, we will adjourn the first meeting. Thank you, I lost the word.
I had that.
Help me, something. Okay. All right, so that moves us to our next meeting. So, welcome to the Tuesday, November 14th, 2023 Board of Education Workshop. We have all trustees present. We begin with and a student. Thank you. We had 2 students come and join us for dinner, and then I said the fun part starts at 7. So I was glad you're here. We do not have any public communication. Is that correct? Okay, that moves us to more learning. I was going to say.
But I never really, we never really know how we can, so we can do that.
We'll move it to
Is
the
this
next.
still that red book that we read like
Yeah.
a million years ago?
That's it. Just the first chapter.
Just the first chapter.
We thought it was.
The articles were sent to us.
Yeah, I sent you the first chapter. Yeah, the book itself, but I will get a copy of that hard copy, like soft copy. I'll leave or I'll do it to you. Got it. Okay, and that was our, we didn't talk about it.
I was going to say,
I
I'm looking at this going, oh crap, that was tonight, wasn't it? I was thinking it was next month, and it's not.
So, yeah.
So, okay.
You did send out
Yeah.
something that.
Yeah, and with a copy of the article. Right. Yeah, I did send some copy of that, but I'll get you all soft copy.
So we'll push that to the
We'll push
next.
that next.
And I didn't notice it when I reviewed it, and I put it.
Yeah.
I just noticed it, even that's like, hold it up, I was like, oh no, I'm in big trouble.
So you just sent something.
So,
I know we had to dig for it, it was back in.
No, but yeah. Yeah, I remember
I will
when we
move
got
that
it.
forward.
okay, so we'll, we read this
Got
one.
it from several years ago.
Yeah.
Jennifer Gottlieb had us read it.
We did it, I would agree, but it's red.
Oh, look at that, Gary's got it with notes.
Okay, yeah.
It's prepared.
Beyond testing,
Yeah.
looking at alternative.
The first
for you,
chapter
yeah,
was
so you can see it.
photocopy, what
Yeah.
picture taken and sent to us all.
Yeah, scan.
Yes, scan.
Got it.
Thank you. Sorry, I completely flubbed that. Okay, let's move then to number, oh, that is number 2, okay. We'll move to number 3. I'm not tired, not at all. Okay, we'll move to teaching and learning options.
Are you ready for me?
Hello! Hi.
Hi. So, on behalf of our teaching and learning team, we wanted to provide you an update this evening to kind of circle back to a conversation the board has given us in several different ways, mainly through our accountability plan last time in terms of giving us some feedback around our calendar. We're working to really be able to provide a really transparent process as it relates to our calendar, making sure we're really strategic with you as it relates to your priorities. And really the presentation is just brief, but to provide you just kind of it's sort of twofold. Just to, number one, provide you an overview of where we are in the process, and number two, to help you know how to be inclusive with you about kind of co-designing if there's something we missed or if there's something that you wanted us to reconsider as we go forward, just to make sure we're on the same page. So, and I know you had the opportunity to preview this, but just a summary of the criteria. Sometimes I know as board members, many of you have shared that people ask often, you know, what goes into designing the calendar. And there's several different considerations that we want to be clear with you, obviously, as well as our community. And those are listed here. I won't read every piece of them, but it is important to realize that it's not just an arbitrary process. This is obviously negotiated with our teacher group, but it is important to realize we have federal, state mandates and guidelines to follow, but also our superintendent priorities. Those of you that were here years ago, we were able to think a little creatively about how we could provide ongoing professional learning, and that was something that was a priority of the board and their superintendent to really expand those opportunities for job-embedded learning. In addition to that, we look at what's happening kind of in our county area and looking at different pieces again throughout what's recommended. What will be new this year for our calendar committee to consider is we are looking and hearing your feedback about honoring and thinking about ways that we're embracing the diversity of our community and looking at holiday observances. We will look at student absentee data as well as staff absentee data. We recognize that our community is all encompassing and it's not just about our staff. And so we, as you know, put out a survey towards our community back in October, and we were able to think a little bit differently about that. So just to kind of begin with the end in mind, this lands with our calendar committee, and then our calendar committee will kind of chew on some of this data. We'll report all of that out to you, and so you can look at it as a bigger picture and see where we kind of land. So I just wanted to kind of, again, start with the end in mind and move from there. Yes?
Who's on the calendar committee?
It's not sure yet. So that's through the negotiation process, and usually what we do is break off and have a committee of people that as sort of a subgroup. We want to make sure that we're very intentional about who we bring into the conversation and making sure we're doing some learning around that as well.
But it's to follow up to that question, what groups are typically?
So members of the negotiating team. So we're named as our cabinet team is the negotiating group, and then also our teacher group has their roles.
Okay, so the calendar committee is made up of representatives from the teachers union, representatives from and this is because the calendar is negotiated between the union.
Correct.
So it's not something the administration can just set on its own.
Correct. Yeah.
Good question.
Christine
So
and
in the
Chris for
previous-
sure will be on there from our side. Christine and Chris for sure, so cover them.
So in the previous slide, how come we do not specify that TEA also should be part of that?
We put staff in the survey. That's part of our. We could put that in if you like.
Because
a
it's a
formality.
big aspect of it, right?
We have it in later. That you're right. That's a summary of kind of our criteria that we use. I was just trying to showcase what we use administratively to inform our decision making that we bring to the table with our TA. But yes, they are a major player, obviously, in this. So obviously, just the overview quickly of the law that we're to follow. We don't get to pick the number of days. At times, we have laws that we're to adhere to, which are 180 days and 1098 in terms of hours of instruction. In terms of our superintendent priorities, we want to make sure that we're in alignment with our strategic plan, and ultimately that there's a real sense of belonging that we provide through that to our entire TSD community. We want to make sure that high-quality teaching and learning experiences are present in our calendar. We have adequate staffing to maintain our operations, obviously, and then having the high-quality professional development.
So that
You have to meet both criteria.
Okay.
Yes,
Correct.
yes, correct that, thanks.
Because I was just like, I'm like, or, I'm like.
She asked me, I said, yeah, that's, I think that's changed.
Because I was
We
like,
have flexibility.
I'm like, can we use that as the bargain?
We're gonna add that with the Michigan Merit curriculum?
It's a lot different, right?
So I was like,
So in summary. No more creative, right?
Just very excited for a moment.
So we heard from you, and again, in various ways of feedback, and please feel free to provide, sort of missing another piece here, but a multi-year calendar allows for forward planning for families, of course, alignment with some surrounding districts in general. The instructional continuity, we've heard a little bit about the choppiness of some of the calendar days and things like that. We also have an interest in looking at data objectively, and so that will be interesting to take a look at some of the student absentee data. And when I say that, I mean when we're looking at holidays in general, what students and staff where they're absent. I think we find that to be interesting.
I thought that was a really good idea. It's like, where are the
Very
national breaks? People
objective.
are gonna take it anyway.
Right,
Yeah.
very objective way of taking a look at it, so I
Yeah.
think that'll be interesting to take a look at together. Obviously, we're following the law and we're being respectful and inclusive of religious holidays. So that kind of, in summary, one just quick glance, and again, I won't read this slide, but there are legislative pieces to consider as we move forward in terms of the common calendar in Oakland County. They have this broken out for, both for winter break, for spring break, and for, the February break as well. It's a recommendations and considerations for the county calendar that is built out for, until the 28-29 school year. So I just wanted the board to just, again, this is sort of a basic overview of what we have to consider and take a look at, providing, that overall framework.
And we don't have to legally follow the Oakland County Common Calendar, right? It's their suggestion that this is being cooperative, trying to, or do we
Yeah.
in fact have?
Well, we do have the ability to get a waiver. We can ask the county for a waiver.
So you, okay.
And typically you get
Rather
the
than the one
waiver,
that has the.
but you do have to ask.
You have to ask. So I was gonna say, okay.
But what advantage do our parents or our teachers have following that? As in, do we have like shared teachers, shared
So we
training,
have teachers
any
who
of
have
those?
kids in different districts.
Yes.
That's-
Yes. There are definitely some advantages to everybody having the same break, right?
Except like midwinter break, ours is 2
2
days.
days.
West
They have it.
Bluefield Hills is 1 day, they just take.
Right, that's
They
why I
they don't
just
even have it
recommended.
right, they just have the 1 day, so we're probably more in line.
January 1st, December 31st, they're 27, 28 school year, like, no one's been allowed to. I'm not sure the third is a Friday, so.
So this is just a basic where we start when we look at the calendar, and just to name the process that we kind of.
But if you felt
we look at
strongly,
this.
you could ask for.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's what I was
Yeah.
wondering. Okay.
So a quick update on the survey. We sent a survey out for the first time since I've been here, actually. I don't remember
Yeah,
that.
we-
Yeah,
that would be
we-
the
First time since I've been here.
We wanted to make sure that our parents felt included in that process, and we really did want to hear from parents. In a real simple survey, sometimes we over-survey folks, and so we wanted to just get a general idea of where they stood, and that was just, again, part of the board's feedback, that we need to inclusive with that. So we had a great turnout, almost 3,500 respondents, about 2,000 parents, 890 students. We asked kids what they thought about this as well. We had 360 of our staff, and then 148 of both parent and staff. This really doesn't have a big weight. We just want to be transparent. That's how we put it on the survey, so we just left it in there just so you're able to see it. So on the whole, this is, again, this presentation just hitting the highlights, but on the whole, it was interesting. We had to check some of our preconceived notions of what we thought we were going to see. We thought 79 would be lower than that, perhaps, based on some of the feedback we hear often about the choppiness of what feels like in the calendar. So overall, we had most responders saying, they were really happy with our calendar. That doesn't mean we're not going to do anything about it. It just means that was just kind of general feedback. Students, 58%, and
Somewhat.
staff, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
there's room for improvement.
Right.
I put someone happy in that,
So I was gonna say, you did, really?
You're so lucky.
Great inflation.
I'm not hostile.
Yeah.
So important to things that we're asking, it's not a vote. So if somebody's saying we
Yeah.
prefer this, it doesn't mean we're doing that, it's just informative information for the committee to consider. And so some of the general themes that all groups were relatively happy with our current calendar. All groups preferred either full days or half days for professional development. And so that's something that we asked because we know that professional development is an important key factor in our strategic plan. But it kind of stepping away from like an early release or a delayed start perhaps is a consideration, and that's something that was in the survey. So that doesn't mean, I want to make sure that that's happening because these are negotiated items, but that was just a piece of feedback from all the groups that was in common. A majority of the group would prefer to start school after Labor Day by a slight margin, I would say. That doesn't mean we're starting school after Labor Day, it just means that and that was kind of a surprise to our group, that because typically there was a tendency to think that we would get out earlier perhaps, and so.
But it's only a slight majority, is that right?
Yeah, but it was clear in the survey that if you start later, you're gonna get out later.
That's not true though. When we started in the district, we started after Labor Day and we got out at the same time. And then we started going earlier and we still got out at the same time. The school year hasn't actually in the last 8 years gotten shorter.
Mhm.
It's gotten longer. So,
Because
The shorter days, more meeting.
Again, but to meet the board objective, again, maybe we're not doing it right, but you gotta have to meet it.
Yes.
That was a strong.
yeah, you really have, yeah.
So it's important to,
You have a question
Yeah,
for the
let's do
student.
oh, hi.
I just have a quick
I'm sorry.
question.
Yes.
So just kind of, I guess, thinking about my happiness with the calendar survey.
What did you put? I'm just kidding, I won't put you on the spot.
I think back to like the school board top priorities slide, and it mentioned how one of their priorities is to be inclusive of religious holidays. And I know I celebrate some non-traditional religious holidays like Eid or Navratri or Diwali. So what would be the process to incorporate some of those non-traditional religious holidays into the calendar?
So that's something that our group our administrative group will be sharing as a priority of the board. And so to make sure that we are looking at what other districts have done to how would they honor those holidays, for instance, and by way of observation, or sometimes those are days off, and then we agree with our teacher groups to kind of see where we are in terms of our days and times. But we know that is a priority, so that's something that we'll be moving into negotiations with.
And if you notice in the previous slide, it's listed as one of the factors because there's a recognition that we have not done an effective job of that. The other thing is if you look at the data, just given that we're such a pluralistic community, you're not going to get a majority against any one of those holidays. So we have to recognize that we're going to have pluralities of people that are going to have different days that are important. So we're going to have to think about honoring days that the majority of people may not observe.
There's some really good examples out
Yeah.
there of what other districts have done as well. So-
And I think, and that's the other thing is, as you said, there's different ways you can do that. You can shut the school down for the day. You can create content, some kind of honor on that day. There's other things, so that's what the committee will have to figure out what we'll do. But that's one of the main reasons we did the survey, is we wanted to understand everybody in our community what religious holidays they're observing. And I would tell you, don't refer to your holidays as non-traditional. Your holidays are traditional, they're just traditional for a different group of people. And we need to recognize that.
Okay, thank you.
Lastly, we had, in terms of just the breaks, most people agreed that we should keep the same. That there would be, in terms of the winter break, keeping it longer, and having the winter break around the same time in lieu of getting out early. I think it's important to recognize that there seems to be, with all those things considered, getting out early is not one of the priorities there.
Yeah.
So it makes,
So
there's a
surprising.
lot of things that we have to consider in moving ahead. But we wanted to again give you the opportunity in terms of this timeline. I know this is brief, but I did want to make sure that the board we were transparent with you about where we are with our group as we start into these discussions, and that in addition to that, the community input is really important. Our teacher group is one group, but we serve a larger community, as you have shared. Again, we're just want to be transparent about where we are. We will also we will think about
starting early, but we're not fully utilizing, but then they also get out a week earlier. And so we have really just extended the year and are not using the time. It seems
We are
that-
using the time, we're using it for professional development. Again, that's back to superintendent priorities. So,
Well, that was a board priority.
yeah, it's the board priority. So, yeah, we are using the time. It's not that we're not using the time, but we're using the time in a different way.
Well, and so I think that might be, you know, once we do come up with a calendar, and I've said this before, that information needs to be communicated to parents. Or to,
That's
you know,
what
to,
we're trying to do.
to the community. But, you know, even details like that of, you know, why do we, you know, start a week before, but then really not use a lot of that time? It's Friday professional development day, you know, Labor Day's on Monday, it's not on a Friday, there's no need for that to do. And it might
We're not
be-
allowed to have school on Friday. State, isn't that state law?
I don't.
Yeah, that Friday, you're not allowed to have, in the month of August, you're not allowed to go on
That was
Mondays
the
or Fridays.
compromise of the tourism.
That was
If
the
you start
tourism.
early, you
To
can.
give waivers.
But to your point, sharing what we're obligated to do by law,
Yeah.
and how, just being transparent with the process, I think there are assumptions or questions I think to share.
But also looking at it in your districts and see what they've been able to do in terms of utilizing, you know, reduced time, with the understanding that, you know, we handle professional development.
So, question on that, so we're not allowed to have school on the Friday before Labor Day, can we use that for PE? Do we know?
I don't know,
I don't
not
think
sure.
we would get agreed.
Not certain.
I know, I was gonna say.
That's
Well,
where our
let's
attendance
see
would
how it
be.
goes, yeah. I'm not sure that would be a.
Okay, just wondering, I was talking more from the perspective of the law.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
It's not necessarily, negotiation may not work out that way, but.
Yeah, I think that's related to classes. I think kids can't go to class.
Okay.
That long weekend, families, travel.
Makes sense.
So, did we, I mean, is this a big enough N that we know that it's representative of our district, or did we ask demographic information to kind of get an idea that sample is really representative of our?
The sample's well above what we need to worry about in terms of non-response error.
Yeah, I'm just a little worried that we know that sometimes some of our,
Immigrant families. Yeah.
don't respond.
That's why I think, so that was more perception data, and then what we have with our own objective data in terms of student absenteeism and things like that is a really telling story. That's one of the questions we asked, and we didn't share here, is what holidays do your family celebrate? And it's almost exact when you look at the absenteeism.
Oh, you know what, I think I
So
saw
that's
that.
pretty, yeah,
Okay,
so
got it.
that's, it's really telling, so we're capturing the whole, to your point.
Okay.
Well, then again, that's where I'm like, this calendar can't be doing what the majority of people are saying, because we have these pluralities in our
Sure.
community. And now we have data to show that. It's like, you can't ignore a third of your population and they say it's important. So it's, the question is how do you do, how do you honor?
That's really important. This data, I think, is gonna allow us for the first time to tell a more compelling story in negotiations, which we haven't done in the past.
Right, yeah.
So I think it's, and to that end, it should yield better results that work for everyone. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want, we want the results to work for everyone. No one's gonna get everything they want, but if everyone gets something more than what we had, then I think it's a.
Following up on Nancy's about representative data, did you know that we get a good representation of all the schools or high schools kind of thing?
3,500 people is very, yeah, you're saying the.
I guess, did we get all the schools? So we
Sure,
should
we have that breakdown.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
We
it's.
feel good about it, and I think it's best couched with, again, the objective look at the absenteeism. I think for us, that's not relying on people to provide a survey, so it's a really, it's almost a perfect match, which
Yeah.
is fascinating.
It's actually fascinating.
Mhm.
The behavior matches the most of it. so.
No, I think that's a good check down.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another question is, our next steps.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
think Judy goes.
All right, so Chris and I are going to jump into kind of our annual review here of student achievement data. Throughout the course of these slides, we look at a variety of data focusing on our students in grades 3 through 11. That's where really our data is collected from. The last few slides, we look at some graduation-based data for our students as they leave the district. But we really wanted to, in this slide, kind of captures the data that we're focused on in this presentation. So throughout the organization, we have a variety of means to collect data. And not every piece of data is in this presentation. We have focused our data in this presentation specifically on our standardized assessment data, looking at our SAT suite of assessments. So as most of you know, our students in grades 8 through 11 take the PSAT 8, PSAT 9, PSAT 10, and then SAT 11. That allows us to look at the growth of a program and the achievement of a cohort over time. That's great data for us as an organization. It's fairly consistent data. We also look at our MSTEP from 3 through 7. And then some of our instructional and benchmarking data, which is, some of it's included in here. The Common Lit assessment is a new assessment for us as an organization that we're using with our 6 through 12 ELA. We had spent time talking with you as a board about having additional data similar to the useful functional data that K-5 has with Fondas and Pinnell. K-5, the Common Lit assessment, we began using this fall, so we're just emerging and using this data. It's collected in each one of our ELA classrooms with a classroom assessment that lasts 1 period, and it's standard aligned so that teachers are able to, at the secondary level, create groups looking at, all right, Christine's really strong at analyzing evidence, but she's not so strong in the language conventions. So when I'm working with her in small group, I look for her to support her. We're also introducing NWEA. That's something we'll talk about in these slides as well for our math data. We're looking at implementing NWEA later this winter in our middle schools as we look at our middle school math program.
What does it say for you?
Northwest, that's one of the questions I can't answer.
What is it?
Northwest Educational Assessment.
It's a fairly common assessment that's used in many, it's a state recognized assessment that many districts use for growth, to measure growth.
Right.
And it's national.
It's
right?
national and
So the,
national.
right, and it's norms, so on my stuff. Yeah, it's been around for a number of years.
So the first data point that we're going to dig into is our SAT 11. So our SAT 11 is a nationally norm reference assessment. It is consistent in its content over time and its structure over time. So the SAT actually did change back in 2016. It went from a 3-part assessment to a 2-part assessment. But from 2016 until now, it has remained fairly consistent in its approach. It was one of the leading collegiate assessments that's accepted in colleges, so that's why it's valuable to us. We know that some colleges are stepping away from using those assessments, but this is one that has remained credible throughout. And as I mentioned earlier, because it is a suite going 8th grade through 11th grade, it's a useful data point for us. It's important to know that when we look at this is data that helps us look at our programming. Right? This is dead data to us, right? So this is data on a cohort that has gone past, like they've moved along, they're no longer with us. They've moved to their senior year, they're not active with juniors. This is not the kind of data that we would use to dig in to try and try to fix a student or try to identify a specific student. And right, it's not formative in nature, right? So it allows us to compare across county and student groups.
So Christine, at some point, I'd be interested, we had a group of colleges come to speed dating tomorrow. And I was surprised that those 3 colleges said students can elect not to share their SAT scores. I had heard some colleges, so I would be interested in understanding. I think colleges are realizing these tests really aren't predicted at all. And I would be interested in understanding, do we
optional.
Test optional.
Yeah, it's test optional, whereas I think U of M still does.
I was gonna say, U of M and Michigan, as someone who's just sat through the college application process, I can tell you U of M and State still want them. A lot of the comprehensives don't care. Wayne State is probably the only R one in Michigan that doesn't care.
Central didn't care, Northwood didn't care, they said they were all test optional.
I think all 10 that said that you could get in with a 3.0 no matter what, were all test optional. So figure the 10 Michigan schools that agreed to that were then part of that agreement, so it was test optional. So I can't remember.
Yeah, I would just be interested to see, you know, who is doing that and whether that trend is going, because
So,
that may very well be the biggest testimony on whether these tests matter.
yeah, good point. But I also heard, even though the colleges are going test optionals, there is no trend of the kids not taking the test or not reporting it because they're worried that if they don't report it,
Well,
they
they have state, so.
Here,
But-
increase their options.
I think your point, just to emphasize though, so, why do we look at this data? It's not to fix a kid, it's to look at our own practice and to identify holes in our practice for kids who are coming up.
Right.
And that's the value in this, is it's a standardized way of looking at
Yes,
it.
yes. And we'll dig in a couple slides to how it actually becomes more useful for us. So this, go ahead.
You'll see, I was gonna say, throughout this whole presentation, I know last month or 2 months ago, I challenged the administration to say, what are the measures you wanna look at, and what's the rationale behind, well, how do we use them? This is, because you can bury yourself in these numbers, and the important thing is there a subset of these numbers that can help us improve practice in a way that's consistent with our strategic plan? And so that's why you see the beginning of each of these sections, that's why she's laid out for each of these. This is what it is, and this is why we care about this measure. And I think as a governance board, that's what we need to focus on, is let's keep these in context about what they're good for and what they're probably not good for. So,
Or are there other things that we do that?
right. And I'm sorry, you said, go ahead.
One more question. So I noticed how Athens and Troy High have a socioeconomically disadvantaged course demographic. How come IE doesn't?
It's a great question, so let's dig into what's really saying, Rita. So, our
She
data.
wants us to give over.
Yeah, so our,
Get
great
to the
prompting
data.
question, I appreciate that. So, this data that's represented here is, summary data for the building performance. So you'll see the blue line is, International Academy East, the black line is Troy High School, and then the red line is Athens. At the bottom of the chart is the percentage of the total building that qualifies for free or reduced lunch, our socially economically disadvantaged students. So we have that data for Troy High School and for Athens, but that data is not available specifically for IA East, because when it's reported as the consortium across the 3 campuses. So we could put what it is
break them out.
across the 3 campuses, but IA East campus in and of itself, we don't have access to that data.
Okay.
So that's why that's not.
So Christine, just to clarify, the percentages is for all 4 grades, but the data is only for 11th grade.
Correct.
Just
Yep,
to clarify.
yep, that's right. That's right. So what you'll see here, and I think you can kind of, it's pretty self-explanatory what you're looking at. In the 2018-19 school year, 100% of students at the International Academy East tested at proficient or advanced in the SAT performance, and I think that's pretty incredible. That's that one data point that's there. I double-checked with Jerome that he didn't just drop a point on there, but 135 out of 135 students tested at that level, which is incredible. I do think it's important to know that.
Do you know what score that is?
I don't know what the cut score, and the cut score changes.
Yeah.
Changes.
Okay.
So, I do think it's important to note that there's not sufficient data to be able to identify a category of students for ELD or special education services at International Academy East, because there are not many students who attend the International Academy East who fall into either of those categories. So when we look at numbers and we're comparing apples to apples, we're not really comparing apples to apples. And so I think it's important to celebrate and look at the performance that's there, and that's what that line indicates. I think it's important for us to know that nationally there has been a decline in performance in the
in the performance on the SAT from 2019 through 2023. In 2023 nationally, 40% of students who took the SAT, so about 1.7 million students took the SAT, 40% met proficiency in both the ELA and mathematics. So when we look at what the national average is, just so you know, you can see how we can look at that national averages.
And not all students have to take it.
Correct.
Other students.
Right. Thank you, that's great.
And in Michigan, do all students
It's
have
part of
to
the
take
Michigan
it?
Merit Examination, yep, it's required. So we know that there's, when we look at our data, obviously one of the things that we notice is the dip in our scores from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. We can see that our students are continuing to grow back. So when we look at Troy High School, we look at Athens. We do see a larger dip in performance at Athens High School than we do at Troy High School summatively. We're going to dig into what that looks like and what that means in the next couple slides. It's important to note that at our two schools, our populations are different. We have different students who we are testing. And when I say that, I specifically am referring to, we have a higher number of students who are socially economically disadvantaged at Athens High School. So we're almost 20% at Athens High School, which we know does impact their student performance assessment. We also have spent some time looking at and talking about the testing structure at both schools to learn about and ensure that we have the structure set up to optimize performance for students, that we are intentionally structuring, and leadership around the assessment time as well. So those are some areas where we know that we have growth and we're focused on. I do want you to know that as a board, when we think about the SAT in sum total, we are anticipating another redesign of the SAT in 2024. So currently it is a in-seat paper pencil assessment. It takes a little more than 3 hours for students to take. The SAT has announced that its goal is that everyone will take it digitally in the spring of 24. And their goal is to shorten the assessment significantly and have it become digital in spring of 24.
So this year's juniors.
This
Juniors, what is this year?
juniors, spring of 2024. I would imagine, we have not gotten notice that that's actually happening yet, so my guess is that it's going to be tested nationally in spring of 2024 before the state of Michigan adopts the required 2024. What we've seen in the past, Chris has lived it, Rich has lived it, as we've gone through when MEEP went digital, leaders, right, up on.
Well, because the PSAT was forced digital this
It was,
year,
yes.
pretty short notice.
Right.
So I would not be surprised if it's probably good to keep in mind.
It will be interesting though, because there is only one PSAT and MSTT testing time nationally. Everyone has to take it on the same date.
Oh, that's true, SAT.
And the SAT is optional throughout, so it'll be interesting how the rollout works, so.
Are there differences in, like we have adopted MTSS, right, support systems in our high schools now for kids who need help. Are there any differences between the two high schools, or they're very similar?
As far as what interventions we provide, they're very similar.
Okay, so we're doing the same thing in both the schools, except with slightly different results, seems like.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So, on this assessment, what you'll see is, or I'm sorry, on this data chart, what you'll see is a deeper dive into kind of the differences in how our two schools are doing. So we look at, this is specifically looking at ELA and our students' performance in evidence-based reading and writing on the SAT. I think it's important to notice that from the 2022 to the 2023 school year, we see some positive growth back after returning from the pandemic, and our anticipation is that will continue in the right direction. Our students at Troy, and you'll see this as a pattern throughout, have been significantly less impacted in ELA post-pandemic than they have been in math. So we've seen our math scores on our assessments have a more enduring impact than our ELA scores. So that leads really to this next slide. We can see it's very evident that our work and our focus needs to be on mathematics at Athens. We've had that conversation. We are focused on that. Vernon and I have had conversations about what does it look like to support, how do we have conversations that put intentionality around our assessments, and we believe that that will help us start to move in the direction when we continue to dig deeper into our instruction to support students. If you were to reflect on the experience of this junior class over their 4 years of high school. These students were in 8th and 9th grade during the pandemic. In 8th and 9th grade, our students are exposed to Algebra 1 as a foundational skill. We know that Algebra 1 is a gateway skill for success in later years of mathematics. So we believe
Yeah.
that for our students
Not coincidental.
who are not successful because of their background, so we have students who are going to be successful regardless of what we do. For students who are not, don't typically fall into that category, the disruption in their learning during those foundational years, we believe have impacts here. And we'll continue to study and watch that, but that's something that.
So we had seen the improvement or the slope up from last year to this year in ELA, but not in math at all.
Right, we've seen it in enduring, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it moves very not much
It
if you look at it.
not much.
It did move.
Good point, good point. That's right.
But, you know, and I know you are concerned about the gaps between the two high schools. And I took this year's data and I ran for Oakland County, and I ran a linear regression to see how predictive is socioeconomic level to success in 11th grade for ELA and for math. I got an R-squared of 0.91. So essentially, I mean, it's like you don't get those R-squared
There you go.
out there in the wild.
There it is.
Oh, got it. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't think it was going to be in there. Okay.
There it is.
Okay.
But if you, so when I did that, I went back and so I said, all right, well then, let's look at all of the school districts in the county, and with the R-squared of 0.91, I can predict what your score should have been based on your socioeconomic level within your district. And then after I did that, then I looked at what were districts' actual scores versus the predicted scores, and then resorted our typical, you know, we usually see top to bottom performing. So I resorted it based on how much are you out of whack from where you should be, either positively or negatively. So you can see the black bars where we are. But what's interesting about this is if you look at something like Clarkston, for instance, Clarkston is a -11. They have the same socioeconomic level as we do. So we are overperforming, they are underperforming. And so there's a couple, if you look at like Bloomfield Hills is either at or below where they should be based on their socioeconomic level. So it's a different way of thinking about the data, but you know, ideally you would create this model based on every school in the state and over time and everything. I just wanted to see, I ran the correlation, went, wow, that's high. So then I thought, well, let me build a linear regression and create a model. And then when I saw this, I'm like, this is pretty powerful stuff. But so I show this to you because we know that some of the gap we see between even Troy High and Athens is driven, you could argue 90% of it is driven by socioeconomic level. So you could kick back and go, well, there's nothing to do about it. The nice thing about it is that we are closing the gaps, and in some cases, and I didn't run this for Athens versus Troy High. So that's the other thing to look at to see, well, is Athens outperforming where it should be? So I haven't done that yet. But this is just me playing with the numbers, trying to figure out how do I think about this data and to put it in a way. Because the other interesting about this is that you may find a school that if we look at the raw numbers, we say, well, we can't learn anything from them. You know,
If you go back to the ELA one, yeah.
like look at Lanphier. If you looked at Lanphier's numbers, you would say, well, they're way below us, the raw numbers, but there may be interventions going on. In this case, they're well outperforming their demographic. So then it's like, I was talking to someone from Lanphier saying I want to share this data with them because it's got to be hard. They're looking at 55% free and reduced lunch. And so every time they look at a score like this, they just get beaten up. It's like we're always at the bottom of the list. And I'm like, there's some celebration here if you can do better than that demographic. So anyway, it's another way to think about it. It's not the only way, but it's just another way to maybe think about the numbers
Well, I
and
guess
how we're doing.
That's great. That explains the situation, but then we got to do something.
Right. You can't rest on it, but at least when you look, you go, okay,
Yeah.
we know that it's a challenge. That's the other thing to me is when you're saying I can predict with 91% accuracy what your SAT score is based on the percent of kids that are SE, you're up against a real push, right? You've got to do something very different if you're going to actually move those kids up above where
part of the work that Natalie and Christine are doing with the teaching and learning team, I think is important, that there's no intervention better than what happens in the classroom.
Yep.
So when we say MTSS, the first tier of support is the teacher. So I think it's important that it's not enough probation to have other people, we have to figure out how we're going to get to a classroom teacher who's with the child 80% of the time that they're instructing. You know, that's an important factor. That's the most important tier to influence, especially at the second grade level.
I do wanna, can we go back to the ELA slide for SAT?
Which slide? This
Your
one?
original.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that one, yeah.
That one.
So, that one, yeah. So what I find interesting about that, and it just occurred to me as sitting here, is, you know, of course you can't compare the SAT to the MSTEP, but this is, right, the SAT is a test that is standardized, national, taken by millions and millions and millions of children every year, and, especially pre-pandemic, and, you know, we're kind of slowly, or Athens is quickly catching up to where they were pre-pandemic. Those are higher percentages than what the MSTEP might show for like a third, fourth, or fifth grade. So, I think, you know, something that we talk about is that, you know, a child is not wasting time in the third, fourth, fifth grade. It's the progress over time. And something like this, is showing us that progress is likely happening between third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, and by the time they get to.
It's the continuity of your curriculum and focus on instruction and practice over time that helps the students make that.
Well,
Yeah,
and
so we
to-
shouldn't look at data in
In isolation.
isolation.
Right. Yep.
And I would say the 22-23 cohort, they were the first group to get workshop in middle school. So like when we talk about the value of workshop model, like that cohort was the first group to get that and look at how much higher their scores are than the year previous. So as we look at the trends that,
Pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think if you go to the math too, I
But I
think
mean,
back to their
I
point
think
about
they can recognize.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're not recovering in
Well,
math,
it'll be
right?
interesting
And that
to
to me
see.
is like,
Yeah.
that's where you go.
So
We'll
that is,
see where this is gonna be.
Yeah, that's-
so,
It's really
Yes,
hard to
we're-
relax when you see you're 50%.
I,
You know, it's like 70+%, you feel pretty good. But
Yes.
I understand your point though, but from my perspective, let's say for adults, about 19% of our kids are socioeconomically disadvantaged, but only about 50% of our kids are doing good. So there is a good 30% that we need to make up for, which are not explained.
Which goes back to,
the foundations, the algebra foundations.
Yeah.
right, and an acknowledgement that there is work to be done. And this data demonstrates that and then challenges our team to what are those specific interventions necessary around instruction that target these areas, and that's.
And
that's
you
what
got
we're
data show that,
committing
right?
to.
Some of the studies that we've done, and as a board, I know we talked about a little while ago, probably pre-pandemic, was the impact of tracking over time. So when we look at mathematics versus ELA, I'm not saying this is the reason, but a contributing factor, we, in our middles, historically, had allowed students to opt into, we were sorting our students in middle school in mathematics and not in ELA. So our students have had high levels of exposure to ELA.
All our students.
All of our students, all the way through in in ELA through middle school, right? And up until now this year, 9th grade in our high schools. And so I think what Chris just said a few moments ago, the most important intervention is the core instruction in the classroom, right? So how we are addressing the level of instruction in all of our classrooms is the most important first step for us. And so our belief, what we are going to be holding ourselves accountable to and studying, and we'll talk about this again in a couple slides, is how has our new programming enriched the experience for all of our students, and what is it showing us in our data, right? Like that is really what we're.
And that's not gonna be overnight, it's gonna be over time, so as the middles, there is the elementary middles, and it progresses well with the instruction, I think
is that the content, maybe not so much for math, but for ELA especially, in the SAT is not explicitly covered in the classroom. So is there any way to explicitly cover that, and do you think that would make a difference with these statistics?
Yeah.
So
These are general skills.
That's actually interesting, you can apply and break down this.
Right, so we're gonna,
Yeah.
the next couple slides look at how the test is broken down, so let's go to those.
See if that helps answer your question.
So, when we talk about the PSAT and SAT, and we think about how it informs our program and our use, one of the more useful parts is that we can break it into our subcategories. And our subcategories tell us about or categorize different areas of the assessment. So, the first subcategory area that we're gonna look at is math. We're gonna get to ELA, but is math. And so within math, there are these 3 different subcategories where our tests lie. And if you spend some time, I won't read them to you, but they focus on all of the different areas of mathematics. And then we get feedback on how our students are doing in each one of those subcategories. So if we look at this slide, what we'll see is that the students in green are proficient or advanced, in yellow are partially proficient, and red are not proficient. And this is from 2019, pre-pandemic on the left-hand side, to 2023. And so what this allows us to do is push into our own programming and ask the question, what are we doing in Passports to Advanced Math? Right? Because if we look at that area, we have an increase in students who are not proficient. We look at that red category grow over time. One of the other things that we look at when we look at a snapshot like this is we look at not only if the red grows or shrinks, but also is the yellow going more into green or more into red? So when we're losing kids from the yellow into red, that's not a good sign, right? Because those are our marginal kids who are now falling one direction instead of the other direction. So this allows us to start to think about and further examine our programs to say, okay, Passport to Advanced Math, and then we go back, Passports to Advanced Math include the structure of expressions, the ability to analyze, manipulate, and rewrite expressions. And we can push ourselves as 9th, 10th, 11th grade math teachers and ask the question, how are we doing this? And the SAT further provides us with examples of what that looks like. So it's not just words, but we can actually see the examples of what that looks like too. It's important to note that when we look at this, just before I flip to the next one, these are proficiency in a subcategory. So a student can be partially proficient in a subcategory and proficient in another one, and then be proficient overall. Or they can be partially proficient in 2 and advanced in another one and be proficient overall. So though these numbers look low, our overall proficiency is 61%. So
But if they're not proficient in one, they're not proficient.
nope, it can be a mix.
It's an average.
Yep.
But, you know, this is back to your comment about Algebra 1. The heart of algebra is the most consistently low rated for full proficiency, right? So it would suggest that those kids lost something or missed something during COVID.
But in this one, actually, it's the Passport to Advanced Math that we did the worst, actually.
But it's the different, it's the yellow, look how big the algebra yellow category is, which is partially proficient, which I
Right.
think is telling.
Yeah.
They're unsure in a very foundational category.
Yeah, they're less sure in the heart of algebra now than they were
Right.
in 2019, right? Those assessments when they were in 2019. So it's a different cohort of students.
See, you're glass half full, I'm glass half empty. Because
Right.
I want the green. I want to say, where's my lowest green?
Yeah.
That's where we got the big problem.
I do think another,
We're both.
another important reflection on this, and this is not to say, this is not as a way to say we don't have a lot of work to do, because we have work to do, but is to notice that our 2019 scores and our 2023 scores are not hugely different when we look at how the students are dispersed. And so I say that because I think it's important that we can reflect on the rhetoric that like our kids have fallen off a cliff. We don't see that in our data.
But we do though.
We don't see, when we look at the percentage of proficient students, our percentage of proficient students are about the same. Our students who are struggling have grown, right? So we see that our students who are not proficient have grown.
So in the heart of algebra, you're right. But in Passport to Advanced Math, I still see a 5% drop.
Yes, you do. Yes, but I would argue that when we look at the ebb and flow of our students over time, to me, that's fairly stable.
Most of our losses are going from partially proficient to not proficient.
Correct.
Right.
Like, that's the big, you've got kids who used to struggle their way
Right.
through, and the last couple of years are starting to go, I don't get it, I
Yeah.
can't work. It's the ones on the
So it's the-
borderline
it's
that
the
they're losing, and
borderline.
that makes perfect
Yes.
sense, given the disruption in education, right? That's the kid you're gonna lose, who's just hanging on before, teacher intervention.
So the ones that are at the borderline in middle school, we are not helping them get proficient, instead we're letting more of them fall off. It's kind of what I'm saying, right?
So I'm gonna challenge your language.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think what we are seeing is that our students who had significantly disrupted instruction in mathematics during foundational years of 8th and 9th grade are not able to demonstrate proficiency at as high of a level as students who had 4 solid years of mathematics instruction before taking this assessment.
Okay.
Right, so like we're not letting them fall off.
I get
but
the
we-
point.
Right, so we
They're
have
not able to
noticed and
stand.
we have work to do to better support
Okay.
them.
And to be clear, these are 3 different cohorts, this is not the
Correct.
same cohort.
Right. So similarly in ELA, so to kind of speak to your question, Narita, when we think about ELA, there's actually 4 areas of focus for us. And when we look at our student performance in ELA, we can see, and this speaks to what I mentioned earlier, you can see just in looking at the red here, our students remain more stable in their performance on ELA comparatively to mathematics. This allows us to look at where our students are performing and how we might change our instruction to better support students. And what I see when I look at this is that standard English conventions is an area where historically we have scored not as strongly. So when we think of standard English conventions, we're talking about structure, usage, punctuation, which actually doesn't surprise me very much as a former high school English teacher, because as we move into grammar and context and the study of literature, there's less of a formalized focus on conventions, but that doesn't mean it's not important. My tongue-in-cheek response to you, Narita, is 100% of our students at IA East tested proficient in advance, and you are at the IA East, I think where you're getting a very superb experience. So though you're challenged, I think what we can do is provide our teachers at IA East with support when they're thinking about these 4 subcategories, but I have confidence in your strong performance in that sense.
So the idea is not to teach to the test question, it's to teach all the foundations so that you hit the test question and you can stack
You
it.
can ace it.
You know what to do. That's we want to go well beyond what the test requires. And in the process, you become proficient at the test. Well beyond, yeah.
Narita, I have a question for you. Are your classmates taking Princeton Review SAT prep?
So, what's more popular at the IA, if you guys are familiar, is Kabir Test Prep, or that's really the main test prep that a lot of students take. And the thing at IA is we have a very competitive school environment, and so usually what happens is if one child takes this test prep, gets a good score, everyone is like, okay, we have to do the same thing. And so right now, some students do use Princeton Review or Khan Academy, but really everyone just kind of goes to Kabir Test Prep. They have an online system, I believe, and also virtual classes or in-person classes. And
Is
then
that free?
no.
No,
It's
that's big money.
anywhere between 800 to 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that
because it's
question-
grants.
Yes, that kind of goes to my point about, the fear of test. I had an entrepreneur who actually started a poor man's Princeton Review to go into the inner city, for $50 or something, kids could take. And again, when you teach kids how to take tests, you can get amazing
Love those scores.
improvements.
You goose it, yeah.
You goose it. And we're still doing that, which is why I'm glad to see colleges saying, not, I think ultimately we're gonna get colleges saying, we're not gonna take these standardized tests because there's too much gaming that
I was
goes
gonna say,
in.
it's also why they're not predictive of college performance, because there's too much gaming.
Yeah.
So these next few sets of slides focus on the PSAT 8, and one of the areas of the PSAT 8 that will be important to us as we move forward is our mathematics numbers. So adopting our new mathematics program, 6 through 8, using our PSAT 8 as one of our data points as we move forward will be a very important piece for us and the conversations that we have with you as a board. But that's also where this NWEA will fit, and so I outlined that on this slide. We don't have NWEA data yet. Students are not tested yet in NWEA, but that is something that we are in partnership with. Again, because it is a nationally normed test, but it also allows us to partner and engage in a program evaluation in partnership with Illustrative Math. So they were only willing to engage with us in that study of our district if we were giving a nationally normed reference test. So we chose to do that. These are graphs that relate exactly to the ones we were just looking
And
at.
actually, before you do that,
Yeah.
that test is not an additional,
Correct, yep.
that's not a out-of-class test. It's used within the
Right,
course
yep.
as a formative assessment.
Yes, that's
Right?
correct.
So,
You
I-
get data back in a timely manner. and-
right.
And it is not like a separate, so you just go to math class, and that day, during your math period, you take the assessment. If you need extra time, you're granted extra time the next time you come to math, but it is not a high stakes math assessment where students are pulled into a testing room to do that.
When was the first time we wanted
This winter.
this winter?
And what will the turnaround time be for the teacher to get the results back?
So they'll be able to incorporate that into the teaching for the school year.
Correct.
Correct.
The next day?
Much of that was that step.
If they have the time to do it.
Correct.
It takes a long time, I understand.
So with NWEA, it has a different structure in reporting, and so there's a learning curve for our teachers using it in the classroom. Our goal right now in moving into NWEA is to use it to inform our program selection. And then we'll be able to use it more tightly in the classroom as our teachers learn about how to manipulate that data and use it in their classrooms.
And the.
So T and L will use it more than the individual
Yes.
teachers, at least to begin.
Yes.
I think so.
Okay.
So instruction more than.
We're really
individual
focusing on the formative work within the curriculum.
Good, yeah.
Kind of at first, and then
I
we
would-
study
that makes
ourselves,
sense.
learn what's possible with NWEA. But like Christine shared, I think being part of the study will be really helpful and will give us some good information.
Okay, so this is our PSAT 8 subcategory comparisons. Again, this is just by subcategory. Our 8th graders this year, or this past year, tested 69% proficient overall. When we move into our subcategory comparison in reading and writing, this is really impressive data when we look at this. We have 86% of our students overall who are testing proficient or advanced in 8th grade in ELA. And if we look at our student experience in 2019 and in 2023, we have some pretty consistent performance for our students. I also think it's important to note that our 2019 cohort is our first cohort. No, that's not true, it's 2020, 19-20. So our 2022-23 cohort, our two cohorts who went all the way through middle school ELA in the new middle school ELA structure. So 2020 would have been the first 8th grade that would have tested.
Do we have data for that prior to 2019, or is the PSAT?
We do have prior to 2019 PSAT data.
Like
It would be
2019
interesting
is the-
prior to 2019.
So you'd like to see a long.
Well, it would be interesting to see, so it would be interesting just for me, and so, I'll, like you said, 86% of our
Yes.
students in 8th grade are proficient.
What it looked like in 18, what it
Yeah,
looked like in 17.
but it would be interesting to
Yeah.
see then what the, not that 86% is,
I think we've talked about getting that, Christine, that was one that we just didn't have time to get, but is accessible.
But I think it would clearly show you, do you see a difference in your curriculum?
Right.
Yeah.
Two questions, Christine. So
Yeah,
the
it's not
2019
right?
cohort
It is-
here,
Yes.
they did not have the new ALA. Is that correct?
Correct.
So this 2019, they didn't have the new ALA, but 22, 23 had the new ALA.
Correct.
Okay, so right here it should have been. And then the other question is, do we see the same difference between math and reading ELA in middle school too? As in like, I see ELA has 80-some percentage of proficiency versus math is much
Yes.
lesser.
Right.
So if you go back, okay.
So actually, there's a better.
Better graph.
A better graph. And I keep the slides, we'll have that conversation.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna transition into talking a little bit about step on this today.
All right, You don't have to, really. I'll keep clicking. So this is just a real, exact duplicate of what we showed you last year, just to kind of keep a programmatic eye on where we are in terms of the county. We are, where are we? Great.
Good grade, 70%.
Sorry, this is weird for me. We're gray, the county average is kind of right smack in the middle, and then the state of Michigan in the orange. And so we always just kind of keep an eye on where we are in terms of our Oakland County performance. You can see that the dot represents, you can see this in other slides as well, but this is where we are in terms of our, the economically disadvantaged students. And so that's just how we look at our benchmark. We don't pay a whole lot of attention to 1 or 2 percentage points. It's not significant for us on the higher end of things, and so we really look at this just from a program stance to see where we stand. Same thing in math, you can see kind of where we land as well. You'll notice that, again, in terms of economically disadvantaged status, we are outperforming others that are similar to us, and that's something that we're proud of, and that we continue to kind of make sure that we're being considered in our commission on these.
I didn't have time to replicate those in the past. She said, can you do that for elementary,
Yeah.
but I was at
Yeah, so I've noticed us, and then there is the one that's 3 bars to the right of us seem to be doing good. I wonder which school that is. The one that has 2667 number and 54.23.
So many of our kind of like districts are, we often are collaborating with and they're talking through kind of where they are and where we are in terms of exchanging ideas and things like that. So very common in terms of our extracurricular initiatives in the county, and we like to kind of, again, we say boundary and that where we benchmark ourselves.
All right, we're back to business. So, this is this I think shows a much better graphic representation of across the county, the performance in mathematics and in ELA. So there is a gap in performance between those two assessments across the state, across the county, and Michigan.
And it would be interesting to see, to go by, it's relatively close together. And are we similarly situated as that in terms of our economic disadvantage?
No, we are slightly higher.
We're 9, we're
They're
17.
9, we're 17. So this is just how we compare across the county in PSAT 8.
But it's interesting when you look at the 2 data points, the difference for all districts is somewhat similar in terms of ELA. I mean, for some, it's a much bigger district, but it tracks.
That's been true every year since I've been on board, probably forever, that we never hit proficiency, nobody hits proficiency in math as well as they do in ELA.
Well, except nobody.
Says something about, the math.
We're going to change that.
Yeah, the reason why we're changing.
Yeah, I know, that's what I mean, is it really does support
Yeah, change.
a dramatic change, right? Let's rethink this, and so it's really, this will be very interesting to see what happens.
And then you'll see here, this is our county performance in SAT 11. I do think one important piece, at least from my perspective, to note is when you look at the proficiency in our 8th grade in reading and writing, we talked about how it's 86% in 8th grade. And in 11th grade, it's 76%, 77%.
77.
One of the things that Natalie and I have been studying with her team, and I know that we spoke about, again, pre-pandemic with the board, was our study of ELA over the last 4 years has helped us identify that our student groups from 8th grade to 11th grade start to fall below the average proficiency mark year by year. So most of our student groups are above the proficiency average in 8th grade, which is how we have 86% of students. And then what we see is at the end of 9th grade in PSAT 9, we start to see some of those groups fall below the line. And then in PSAT 10, we see more of those groups fall below the line. And it's not a huge difference, but we believe that our choices in the high school right now are impacting our student performance in 11th grade. So for example, our current structure of course options in Ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade is where we introduce electives. And then in 12th grade, we have a required college-based ELA course. So we're having conversations about how we change 11th grade to be a required course for students. And because of the way our schedules work, we have students in our district who don't take English during their first semester of junior year because they take 2 electives their second semester of junior year. So we have students who are rolling into an SAT test having not practiced any of those 4 areas in preparedness for this. Also, we think about preparedness for college essay writing and all the things that are to come for them. So that's a rabbit hole we can go down on a different day, but I did want you to know that those data points are important, and that is what we look at when we start to think about our programming and choices.
Christine, I just want to clarify and confirm with you that this data with Troy does not include IAT.
Correct.
It is only the 2 high schools.
It's the 3 schools, so it's Troy High
Yes,
School,
yes,
yep,
three
yep.
schools.
So Troy High, Troy Athens, and Troy College and Career High School. The reason that IAE's data is not in here is because they are part of the consortium, and so their data is used on the, no, it's actually, it's Oakland Schools data. So Oakland Schools has its own data line. It's not on this chart. It's not on this chart. It's on their chart that they create, but it's not on ours.
It's weird.
So you don't see it in here, and we can't pull it into here because of the way the test scores get sent back. The state of Michigan uses the IAE's test scores and our accountability scores at the end of the year. So when we get a percentage, like on your schools, when schools are ranked, it's built in there, but that's the only place it's built in.
But we can't get that data.
We don't have that in here.
Okay.
It's gonna be higher. It's a
It's gonna be
self-selecting.
higher, of course,
It
yeah.
is, it's a self-selecting group, you know.
Right.
it-
So these are, again, just a different visual representation of the same data we were talking about. I'm going to skip through these. Carl already shared what these were.
If you want to get that one, I didn't see that one. Presentation or something. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And this moves us into our peer districts. So one of the things that we look at as an organization is how we compare to peers. Why do we have a peer district, and how did we choose those folks? Well, we've gotten feedback, and we know that it's good to look more than just within your own county, that we should look at ourselves statewide. When we think about peer districts, we look at other high achieving districts, other districts that have clout across the state, that we would aspire to be more like in a variety of different ways, but maybe not so much in other ways. So some of the similarities that exist in our peer districts are the size, the economics, and the performance and achievement, and those community expectations. But there are significant districts in some of our peers, significant differences in some of our peers when it comes to different student groups. So many are not like us when it comes to ELD status. Many are not like us when it comes to socially, economically diverse. Many are not like us when it comes to demographics. Troy has a lot of uniquenesses, and that's what makes us so great. Here's how we stack up with our peer districts and our performance.
Can I go back just for a second? I just want to ask, you've got economics per pupil. Do you mean that we have similar state aid numbers, allocation?
We're in a, maybe do what Ark, you know, because Bloomfield's on.
I know,
So-
Bloomfield's on there, they're $3,500 higher, so, yeah.
Right.
But I just,
The most.
pardon me?
The districts that we're looking at tend to be also
Higher funded than us.
Yeah, not the high one.
Okay, I just, when I looked at that, I went, because I was thinking, I thought our peer group wasn't necessarily getting the same dollars
Well, it's
per
not
pupil.
all of those things, it's some of, so
Right.
they don't have all 4 of those bullets, they have some of those bullets. So some would have outliers when it comes to economics.
Okay.
We're challenging ourselves to look at places that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's good, it's good to do, but it's,
So,
Yeah.
what's,
I gotta run a regression. Then we'll see where, because you run the regression and then you're gonna see the change, because that's right based on.
maybe we
It'll-
should've
it'll move
we
us to
should have
the
just
left.
waited for that.
I know.
So when we look at this, this chart and the next chart, and Chris shared earlier when she was referencing the NEET scores, when we look at a matter of a 0.5% or a percent, right, what we're not looking at is the difference of where we stack up specifically in there. What we are looking at is that we are able to compete with the best in the state, right? So these are our group of peers. And yes, we aspire to be on the far left of this. We would love to be there. But our goal is to check ourselves when we look in a mirror and say, we believe we're top of the state. And this is who we measure ourselves against. And when we look at this, we see we have room for growth, but we also see that we're able to run with this group. And we should be very proud of the fact that we're able to do so.
This is total composite.
Yes, yep, 8 and 11. And then, same thing with our step 3-7. So, how we compete with our peers, the fact that we are in the mix with those high achieving districts. We aspire to continue to move left, but we also know that our work is going to drive us in that direction.
Remind me where Forest Hills is.
West West.
Grand
Rapids.
Rapids.
There,
Very,
the stuff that comes out of them is, yes, the stuff that, yeah, I'm gonna say, I've seen some
So
solid
the-
things.
Grand Rapids Public Schools is the C.
Yeah, and just even other places, like,
No, East Grand Rapids Public Schools is a suburban area.
Suburban Grand Rapids.
Yep.
Yes, very different demographic.
All right, and then just a few celebrations on these last few slides. We thought that it would be important for us to be looking at data, so specifically our International Baccalaureate Diploma Program data. So why do we use and look at this data? The IB curriculum, as I'm sure you're all aware, is internationally aligned and recognized. IB diploma students test in 6 different categories, subject areas, and also the DP4, which includes creativity, activity, and service, and an extended essay and a theory of knowledge course. I'm ready to tell you guys all about those wonderful things. But it is a globally recognized program. And our students at IA East are all full diploma bound students. So they have a full wraparound program that they test for this full diploma. So the IB diploma acquisition rate, this is our, again, over the last 5 years. I talked to Patrick, Mr. Griffin, a little bit about this past year. So we have a little bit of a dip in our acquisition rate going into this year. Some of his reflections have to do with just the disruption of experience for those students in particular. But he and his team, so their feedback that they get is a little bit, well, it's a lot more nuanced than what you're looking at right now. They get feedback like an AP teacher gets feedback. So they can see how their students are being assessed in those external assessments, and they can use those to inform their instruction. So their feedback is much more formative to their instruction than our feedback on the SAT. Because they get it specific to the course that they took, and then teachers are assigned to those courses. So there's a direct correlation to student achievement based on instructor.
how does
It's a
this?
huge dip.
What does that mean to the student? Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
gonna say, what is?
Do they get a Michigan diploma but not an IB?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. So all of
They're
us,
dropping, they have a third dropping or a quarter dropping
right.
out.
That's a great question.
What
These
does
are,
this,
these
what
are
does
all,
this look like for?
these are all great questions. So the DP program through IB, all of our students who go through IABs receive their diploma. They satisfy all of the Detroit School District requirements, the state of Michigan requirements. They have a high school diploma. They often don't get feedback on whether they passed with their DP, with their IB diploma until they're in college, because it takes time for that assessment to come back. What students also have access to is a certification, so they can be certificated based on each one of their tests. So they test in their content areas at either a standard level or a higher level, and those scores can be used similar to AP scores in order to earn college credit. So you have to have a certain number of points as calculated by a very detailed rubric in order to earn your diploma. So that includes all of your tests plus your completion of those DP4 things that I had listed on the last slide in order to get the full diploma. But you also get your assessment results on each one of those areas that you tested in, and you can transform those and use those in your college if you so choose.
Is the reduction in acquisition from because they didn't take the test? Because that's not an option for our IA students right now, right?
Correct. So this is the percentage of students who required a diploma of those who tested.
Okay, so
this is not because we had some. This isn't of the graduating class, but 99.9% of the graduating class takes the full diploma assessment. So
they all take it,
Yes.
except only about 72% of them have completed everything required to get the diploma.
not completed, but tested at a
Tested,
level. So,
yeah.
correct.
That means I've gotten the credits enough to get the diploma.
We'll see this year's class. I suspect this, given previous performance, I suspect this year's class will jump back up in terms of
How did the other two
acquisition
campuses?
rates.
I don't have that data on how the other two did this year. I
Just curious, and how it is for other, so you have the Macomb IA as well, and you
Yeah.
have other IB programs around, I wonder how they did. Just like we are doing peer district comparisons for the other high schools.
Well, we know that globally, the acquisition rate is 75 to 78%.
But that's been the case all along, but we've
Right.
always been at 99% or 95% for a while, so.
Well, those have been our percentages
Yeah,
for the
they're
last
there,
5
yeah.
years, right there. Okay. So that moves us into talking about AP. So our AP, our advanced placement courses are highly valued by our community. We have a large student enrollment in our AP courses. Last year, we facilitated approximately 4,000 AP assessments in Troy School District. So quite a few. So we use this data because it helps us inform what our junior and senior year programs are highly driven by our AP courses. So this data that's here focuses on 3 different areas that were named by the College Board in order to be on the AP honor roll. So Athens data is on the left, Troy High is on the right. When you look down the column, the N that you're looking at, the 378. The 378 in the Athens column is the number of seniors in the graduating class of 2023. And then the same thing, the 527 at Troy High School is the number of seniors in the class of 2023. So
Why did they only measure the seniors considering the AP?
because the AP honor roll is based on how those students
The 4 year.
matriculate through.
For the 4
Oh,
years.
It's a
okay.
consolidation.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because they want to look at your experience over time, because College Board has a belief that students should be exposed earlier to AP in their 9th or 10th grade year, so that they get a taste of what the experience can be like, and then they take a couple more throughout their time. The college culture category, that row there represents the percent of students in the graduating class who took an AP at any point. So I think that's pretty important to look at. So at Athens and at Troy High, 61 and 69% of our graduating class, those students sat in an AP course. So those numbers are not that much different. So when we talk about our student enrollment, our student involvement, 61 and 69% of our senior class, the ambitions and the interests are very comparable when you look across our community.
And that was very different probably 6 or 7 years ago. There was a
Yeah.
big difference between students taking
Class taking
AP, yeah, so that's good.
And in that college credit row, we're looking at the percentage of students who scored a 3 or higher. So it's any one student who scored a 3 or higher. So 50% of the seniors at Athens are walking away with a 3 or higher in an AP, and 65% at Troy High. And then the last one, college optimization, is really an interesting data point. It looks at how many students have taken 5 or more APs over the course of 4 years, with one of those being in 9th or 10th grade. Because the philosophy of the College Board is you shouldn't wait and take them all in your senior year. You shouldn't overload yourself and take all APs junior and senior year. And they further have gone on to talk about how from their studies of the influence of APs on college performance, after students taken 5, there is little improvement. Other than, I would argue, if you get a 5 on all your other ones after that as a score, you can earn yourself college credit, right? So when we look at those, we see very comparable experiences between our schools.
One comment, I felt like the college credit is probably more valuable because it actually looks at your score, not just that you've taken an AP class or not.
Yeah, I feel like
And-
that speaks to the quality of the
Yeah,
instruction.
and that's where you see the most difference, 15 percentage points difference between the two schools, kind of. Just as that is where you see the
Because
most
that's
difference.
of
all the years, I guess.
it's still, the base is not of those who took it, the base is of the total class.
If any kid scored
But-
a 3 or higher on
Right.
any
Yeah.
one.
But, I mean, you could read percentages based on, the number of people who took the classes, but when you look at it, you start with fewer people taking the class, college culture, right? So it's close, but it's
It's
still
close,
61
yeah.
versus 69. But then if you have, you could argue if you had equivalent instruction, you would expect that the numbers down below would also be about 8
Yeah,
to 10
about.
percentage point differences. But when you look at college credit, the gap starts opening
Oh,
up. So it does
yeah.
make me wonder about, is there anything we can learn from, if the teachers in one of our high schools teach the AP teachers in the other high school anything? Is there anything that one school's doing that the other isn't in the classes? And the other thing is, are the under threes concentrated in a couple of AP classes? You don't have all these answers off the top of your head, do you?
I know.
Right. but-
Not off the top of
But I
my
mean,
head.
that's when I looked at this number, I was like, that was the number that bothered me most, was that.
Same here, that's
But
what
it's
Bob
also
was
a
saying.
standardized test, and so you also have a very big difference between the two schools of the
So-
Do we know that kids are taking the test? I was just gonna say, you're also, you might not have as many kids, you have to pay for the test, so again, there are, you know.
Right.
There are kids who
Two
don't
questions.
choose not to take their
If you don't have to pay if you are under something. I think we pay for it. Yep. So it's not the economics.
But these are the kids who have taken the test,
Yes.
not of the kids who.
And
No,
sometimes
no,
they
it's
have
not, it's
some
still of
parents
the total,
that say it's a total class.
your denominator stays the same.
Yeah.
No, these are all based on who took the exams.
No, the denominator is the same, that's the graduating class.
Yes.
378, 370, that, because she
Not,
was.
okay, but
Yes,
not
but
okay.
The numerator is who took the exam in all of them. So there were 232
I see what you're saying.
students who took an exam,
Right.
at least one exam.
And
Some of them could have
189
taken-
of those scored a 3 or better.
No, 180,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah.
Correct, yes. Correct.
Yep.
So of the kids who actually took the exam, how many scored a 3 or higher on at least one, not out of all of the seniors?
Right, so wouldn't that be 189 divided by 232?
Yeah, if you could, but
Versus 364 divided,
Yeah.
or 341
So,
divided by.
you know what, we're down a rabbit hole.
We're not,
Yes,
right, we're down a
and
rabbit hole, we
so-
are. But I guess my question is,
It might not be that bad. It might not, of the kids who actually took the test, it might not be 50% higher.
This becomes a data point that we cannot compare as we go
Yeah.
forward.
And this data, similar to, right, similar to the DP, similar to IBDP data, this data comes directly back to the AP teacher, as well as to the building and the building coordinator. But if I teach an AP chemistry class, I get those results and as soon as they're made digitally available. They come to me for my whole class, and I can see how they did.
But it,
And
it's
AP
dead data, because those kids have, I mean, they.
True, it's
they-
programmatic data.
It's
Programmatic.
Right.
It's not,
Right.
you can't change.
Right.
I'm just curious if we see this gap, if we ever look course by course off in one high schools, or do we see a passing, 3+ better in one high school than the other? And does that relate to any instructional emphasis, or is it socioeconomic, right? It's like, it just begs the question, are we doing the same thing? Are the teachers together and they're
And some of it
sharing
is
practice?
also, some of it is also that if you have veteran teachers teaching a class over a period of time, right?
Yeah.
And do you have a shift in teacher in a couple of classes in a building?
Right.
So as you get a new staff member in, there's that, and learning that needs to take place in order for them to get to a point where they're.
And do we provide opportunities for, say, a new teacher teaching the AP class in Athens to sit with the AP teacher from Detroit High, or do we tend to only master and novice within the same building, or vice versa? Yeah.
Right, and I think one of the things that's important to know is the AP tests change year over year, right? The content remains consistent within the categories, they do change year over year. But when you have experiences like we're fortunate enough to have, where you take Brian Glenn, who had an AP physics C student who tested a perfect test score, we recognized that child last year. Like, that tells you that teacher is very in tune into what is on that assessment, right? So that would be a great mentor for what that looks like. We had that again this year in AP computer science, so
So
great areas to
the
go.
idea here is that we track this, that we will now start tracking this. We'll be able to track this down as well moving forward.
And last,
And maybe you see no difference. I mean,
Right.
maybe when you go in, This is just looking for, are there ever any low-hanging fruit that we're just not noticing? You know,
Right.
Is there something we're overlooking?
And reason to celebrate when you look at those college credit and college optimizations, the areas are the highest areas are both
Yes.
platinum, which demonstrate, which suggests that
We're
when
doing
you
something
compare
right.
that, we're doing exactly that organization, they're doing a lot right.
Yeah.
Those are the highest scores that you could get. in
Yeah, we
comparison to
probably, we should flip back and say, this is,
AP test
flip
across
back to the
the
previous
States.
slide, right?
Yeah.
This is a cause for celebration.
Oh, it's a huge celebration.
Right, but we didn't say that.
Yeah.
We didn't say that, we just started
It's a
throwing arrows
huge
at
cause
you.
for
But this is a huge,
I'll also tell you
this
that,
is very exciting.
Mr. Burden, our new principal at Athens, the first thing he said was,
Oh my God.
no, 4%, I just need 4% and I'm gold. Right, if you look at the difference, the
Yeah.
only thing that is different is the 4%
Right.
of the students who are participating, and he was like, done. We're gonna, so I think there's like that, belief of, okay, what are we calculating, how do we implement this?
Great reason to celebrate there.
All right, and last but certainly not least, our Troy College and Career Program. And for those of you who, so when I was fortunate to come onto the team in Troy, we were having a lot of conversations in 2019 about Troy College and Career. It was the year that we were talking about whether we were going to be purchasing the new TLC building. We were talking about how much did it cost to run an alternative ed program. Why are we investing? How are we investing? There was a lot of conversation. And over the last 4 years with Bill Turner being a part of the team, and now Angel Milana, there has been new leadership, new facility, and a new vision around what that space is. There was so much learning that was done during the pandemic, and transitioning from that Niles Center, and what Bill and I walked into, to what is now over at TCCHS. It has just been incredible. The elevation of student voice. I mean, Tegan, I wish he was here, could tell you probably better than anyone else, really how students are able to grow that program and own it over there. So this data is data that I'm super proud of, and you should all
Where's
be
the
very
champagne
proud
bottle?
of for your investment as a board. We see over 4 years a graduation rate increase from 38% to 63%. And as important is the decrease in dropout rate from 23% to 3%. Because when we think about our students, it's really just great. And what I also have is the 5-year cohort, which shows actually 79% of graduation by 5 years, because we have flexibility in our LSAT. I think what's important here is the team that Angela is leading over there is committed to seeing kids through. And that is a very different philosophy than what alternative ed looked like 5 years ago. How do we keep them? How do we make sure their needs are met? How do we even, I believe one of the things that that 4-year is showing you is that team has created systems in which students might need to be away for a little bit in the Aspire program or the Intersect program, but by goodness, that junior and senior, they're pulling those kids back into the program. And so we're seeing those kids coming back in, they're being reintegrated to their community. So this is a show we're going to take on the road. I think nationally, this is something that Angela needs to be talking about, the work that she's doing. And this also doesn't show the 22-23 graduation rate, the last graduation rate, because that hasn't been certified yet. So I should have that by the end of the month, by the end of December, and I will share that with you. But I'm hopeful it's just a little bit more. So we'll end on that.
Thank you, Christine.
This is so exciting to me. To me, this is coherence. This is coherence. This is from the board on down. Everybody was like, okay, we're gonna do this, And there were some headwinds to making it happen, including a pandemic.
Christine, thank you for putting that down.
Absolutely.
Chris, as Chris as well, I mean, my takeaway is just because we have discussed this significantly over the course of the last couple of weeks, just that we have great reason to celebrate in the school district. We continue to do great work. We're outperforming, but acknowledging in this presentation with excellent results, but also showing that there is room for growth. It's an acknowledgement that we absolutely have areas to grow, and this data moving forward allows us to target those areas for growth, target instruction and curricular changes, which we've already done. I think some of the areas that we've identified point to the fact that some of the shifts we've done curricularly are exactly the right shifts. And as we track this data moving forward, we'll be able to see if those decisions were the right decisions and make whatever adjustments down the road might be necessary. Reason to celebrate.
Which, I would point
Well,
to.
17. I mean, you guys are- nobody's resting on their demographics here.
I didn't mention this to you, but we can come up with a way to look at science and social studies data also. That would help because that's something that we didn't talk about.
Right, we did take a look at that, and it just so happens that this past year, we realigned our science and social studies, or 3, 5, and 8. Social studies. We aligned that to what is actually assessed. So prior, what was being assessed wasn't consistent with what we were teaching. We were teaching different. We were teaching it out of order from when it was assessed. So now we're in line, or those assessments are in line with when our curriculum is actually being taught. So it's a long way of saying yes, we'll be able to track that moving forward and share that data. It'll be much better data moving forward, more reflective data.
And invite our team.
Thank you.
That's the
Can we
Yeah,
get a
can we-
couple of
yeah.
minutes? Okay, great.
2-minute break.
Thank you.
Not to keep you here long.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
Another chair.
Will you pull that chair that way? You, as you should. Go study for yourself.
So this chair, if you're
Alright, thanks for coming.
yeah. Very interesting.
You make a cameo at the end, you know, video that you recorded. It was just about learning actually. So you're in it.
Okay. Well, take care.
There you go, from Lansing. It's a really cool place. I ran over and did a tour of it. It's across the street from Lansing. But it's a super cool hands-on museum, lots of space. Some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Had a blast.
No, I didn't see your video. It was too interesting. But
Thank you.
tonight-
No, I'll be back.
I think there's contact information in the back.
Thank you.
Okay.
There you go.
Two people who
Okay.
kind of talk about saying
Thank
they
you,
want
thank you, take care.
more school.
Thanks, Sarita.
Yep, bye.
Good evening. Talking about just how to get.
I think we should do go
Let's see what we got. Hold. Hold it right there.
It's like, oh, you know, that's the killer. Because the Lord was like, it's crazy.
Oh,
I was like, right, cost is just trying to put students there.
and we couldn't do that?
I don't know, they're working on it, okay, but I'm hopeful.
Just use our bus to go to do
No,
that.
still, that's,
What?
that's,
Yeah, no, it is. That's what why our whole bus is. Isn't that why we own our fleet? So that we can.
They went right into storage, they haven't been used.
I don't use it every time.
Yeah, those are the ones that were like, well,
terrible.
why did it get? I don't know what I need, I need to just stay big.
I know, I was gonna say, I got hungry. I don't know why I keep taking high caloric snacks and stuffing them in my firewall. I'm like, I need.
Some work.
Yeah. Must eat this.
Look at me. Look at me. And these are for 600. Well, here's how much.
Well, I eat the salty, you know, I have that sweet.
For 7, they're $200 a piece.
You're not.
And we're done. That's one way. Let's stop for a second. Where we were actually
Same reason as me.
We need to take a step back here.
Yes, that's
Get the doors open. Nobody's buying them. You people on the board don't know what your administration is Everybody's on the right That'll be ready by, you know, I've never met a career now. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we just gotta go to a different.
The idea that having.
It's right, you said.
It's right.
Get a whiteboard and get a group together and run out.
Yeah, Chris, let's go.
But I wonder what.
Okay. You own the clicker, you own the
Since the team didn't make
meeting.
me a seat, I'm just gonna stand for a minute. That's okay. As you well know, we've implemented the structure with our new renewal to our strategic plan a couple years back. And I think it's a really helpful opportunity to just elevate the work that's done. The real work is not done in central office, as we well know. It's really done by the work of our team, kind of in the middle, if you will. So this group is what we refer to fondly as our pillar captains, and they're really able to lead the work. So I just want to thank our group for being here and introduce them before we get started. So this is Sarah Young, as you well know, Dr. Chantal Yancey, who's So Sarah and Chantal represent our red pillar. Ron and I'm Erin Kaiser tonight, and Christine we'll be talking about the green pillar. Obviously, you know Natalie. Natalie's going to be blue and gold. She's going to be John Pagel. And Marie is here talking about some of our furniture, and obviously Christine and I will talk from our level in terms of leadership as well. So just to kind of give a quick overview, we showed the slides about objectives and key results. I know it looks like a lot of words on a page, but it brings the board back to understanding that we really do have some kind of guiding objectives that really lead our work in terms of what we want to have happen. It's not just a list of tasks, but it's important to recognize that we kind of measure ourselves and the teams that we work with in the building to be able to implement that along the way. So again, lots of words, but when we talk about our pillars, it's important that we are reaching this was the work of many hands, and the work of being world-class is, again, far-reaching and kind of aspirational, if you will. So, again, I'm Erin Kaiser this evening, so we'll talk just quickly about some of these objectives. I just, in the spirit of time, we'll kind of hit the highlights. Our format has really been, it's gone well to say, you know, some celebrations that we have, some challenges that we're having, and then some ideas for next steps. We'll be back to talk with the board again in June and kind of reset expectations and talk about January to June and kind of where we go from there. And so, again, just as before with the calendar conversation, we're open to your feedback as well as some things that we can do together as well. So we're talking this evening in terms of the green pillar about early childhood to career. So this is inclusive of our kids and our investment in our high quality experiences from early childhood, all the way expanding into our college and career pathways. And Ron will talk a little bit about that piece this evening. Some of our key results, which is exciting to see, is the increase in access to the high quality preschool. We were able to focus on a meaningful transition from preschool to kindergarten. I want to make sure that this other, okay, no, it's in here. I'll talk about that in a second. But we're looking at the impact of our programming going from about 220 students to almost 550. And so from a variety of lenses, we're able to see Not only that.
That's
we're-
from when to when?
2020 to now. Yeah, so it's phenomenal to see, and I'll talk about where those programs are just briefly. And then this is kind of an overview slide. Ron, I don't know if you want to talk about the other pieces. We've talked about Portrait of a Learner, little thing, little project we've been working on.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, Portrait of a Learner launched, you guys had the, I think on the next
Yeah.
slide we'll see, and the other two we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, so this is just kind of an overview of what our key results were. And so, not to be read by
I know, I was gonna
Zach,
say, I couldn't
but
read it in the
we
handout, I still
we
can't
talked
read
in
it.
our
Okay.
previous data presentation. So the bottom chart, if you look at the line graph, just really shows how we measure our various programs over time. So you start with 2020 and you look at 23. So this is a snapshot of our kindergarten class. We look at our programs such as GSRP, our early on programs, our tuition. So that top line and where you see the most growth in the yellow is our tuition preschool. We'll talk a little bit about specifics with those numbers, but just for the benefit of the group, we just wanted to show how the increase is happening, but also that we track programs over time. The other program that we track or thing we do is kindergarten waiver students, people who sign up early, and those waivers have gone down over time. We'll talk about that in a bit.
And is that related to the pre-K?
No.
No.
Is that
These are people who want to sign their child up for kindergarten when they're 4 years old.
But now, has that changed because they can do the?
Yes.
Good.
Oh, so that's
developmental-
fewer people are starting their
Correct.
kids at 4.
Mhm.
So that downward trend is a
Correct.
positive thing for us.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
great.
Yeah, because we used to have to say, hey, here's $9,000 preschool.
Right.
Like the access.
Right.
Now we have several different options that are advantageous to the family and provide less of a barrier. But hugely important and something that we're extremely proud of. And it's huge credit to Erin. She works extremely hard with our staff over there. We have over 100 staff members in our preschool, between aides and teachers and support staff as well, is the impact that group is having on our children. And so one of the things our team wondered is, just again, by way of looking at color, the greens are good. It's either at or above proficiency level of our children on our universal screener. So those different graphs kind of represent the different grade levels. So that goes from K on the left all the way to 5th grade. So there are two kind of groups of kids. This one is kids with preschool experience, right here on the left here. And this group is kids who had no preschool at all. So you can see that red bar is, we can predict that, I'll be positive. The green bar, if we have more students, we can predict their success with kids that have had a preschool experience in our own system. So what we read about in research is if you get kids in, the better off they are over time. And now we can see that in our own data. It's a huge
And
point of celebration.
This is
for our
6
group.
cohorts, it's not the same kids
Correct.
over time, correct?
Yep.
Okay, but I'm with you because, yeah, you could still show by the end of 5th grade that the improvement continues throughout the entire.
Right. So again, at a glance, it's to be
Pretty
able
exciting.
to be able to see that and to acknowledge that with the group over time.
Just before you go, which is the kindergarten waiver line?
This one right here.
Oh, is that one? Okay.
Yeah, so you can see where we're trying to drive that number down. And in totality, I think that's around,
But TSD pre-K is that the young?
That's the one that went up.
Right,
So
that's what I was asking,
yeah.
those are related, right? We have more people taking advantage of our
it's pretty good.
Pre-K is the lowest.
oh, it's early childhood, is what
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong. And that's up because we added the 3,
So in total.
did that go up?
Which one?
Sorry, the early childhood, the light blue, is that the pilot program?
Yes, that's the.
That's the 3-year
Right.
pilot
Yeah.
program, okay.
What are we, the graph in the left upper corner, what testing or data are we looking at?
That's our universal screener for literacy. Yeah, so all students take that 3 times per year. So
That's
that's.
it's F and B.
I know,
Oh.
but the fact that it's not stated anywhere, I'm
No.
just saying that it would be good
To label the graph.
To label the graph.
Sure, okay, sure.
Well, no, I
just-
assume
yeah.
you're gonna be are you gonna be presenting this at okay. What percent?
It's just a glance at how
Okay.
our group is looking at
I'm just laughing, it's surely good advice, because that's what I kept sending notes back to the team, going, you need a legend on that, put a legend on that, I mean, put a legend on these graphs, because you guys see it all the time, but we're looking at it
Yeah.
for the first time, it's like, what
And
is?
we might ask those questions.
Yeah, so just don't apologize for asking, that's,
So again, those are just two hugely important celebrations from our point of view. We've literally filled the building to the point where we can't have sections anymore. And again, I can't underscore the efforts of Erin and her team and how impactful it is on our community and our children. Ultimately, you'll see that we're tuition, just kind of breaking that down, is over 240 students. GSRP sections are 98. Those are totally free programs to children that qualify. So we increased that again this year by 16 students. We launched those programs at Hill, Morris, and Trade Union and Watts. Strong Beginnings, you get the idea. There's 100 students in pre-K and increasing that, and then 96 students in ECP. So again, the access and the achievement data, we can see a direct correlation. Those 5 buildings are progressing really well, and we're excited to be able to welcome those families that way. Mm-hmm.
Does Erin supervise the preschool,
Yes.
the JARA, so she has to travel with you?
She works with our principals very closely, but ultimately she is the program supervisor of those students, yes. Because you have to have certain qualifications to do so. You have to have a preschool background and basically a PhD in
Oh,
So
yeah,
how
no, but I mean,
licensing.
I'm thinking in terms of when we think about how many staff she's
I was about to ask,
supervising,
yeah.
like, and the structure, and when we think about, like, does she need an assistant principal or an assistant director, like,
Mhm.
like realistically, like, what are we asking of her?
Mhm.
Because she is one human.
Yeah.
Quick question, in
Mhm.
the previous graph, if you go back there, you mentioned that we doubled the numbers, but from 2000 to 2023, right? Is that 2020 to 2023?
So
But how
that's
come
not
the
all
graph
the,
is not showing that?
because those are students in kindergarten that we just monitor we monitor so these are like, for instance, students in this class that had this class here, like these are students who, this is
So shouldn't our yellow somehow show double?
no.
That's tuition only, but all of them together should somehow show an upward trend. I'm seeing more flat, most of it.
Well, you have, if you go from 2020, you have, you're down at 20, you're moving up, those are up, those are
Our
up.
building doubled in size, but the amount of kids who got preschool somewhere else might not
Oh,
have doubled.
right.
So like,
Right.
that's
That's also
the,
just kindergarten.
that's the kindergartners who had
Kindergarten.
preschool. It's
That's
not saying
one
that they
grade
had
level.
preschool at
Right.
our
Not
place, they
Not
had
preschool
preschool
in
period.
Okay.
So-
these
Yes.
are kindergarten.
Kindergarten
So the
only.
numbers
Who had preschool.
Right, so the numbers went
Okay.
up,
Yeah.
That's what it,
the numbers went
It's a
up
good
for
question.
kindergarten, but they didn't necessarily always
Because I was
correlate.
trying to look for
Yeah.
an upward trend.
That's
but
not
I
all
don't
of
see it.
preschool, that's just kindergarten.
just one kindergarten group,
Okay.
so.
So the
kindergarten.
kindergartners in 2020.
Can I go back to her question, because it wasn't rhetorical? So as we've increased the number of kids in this program, we're double the number. Well, what has that done to the number of people that Erin is supervising, and are we being realistic that are we increasing her support to continue to deliver to like twice the number of children?
So
I don't know what her staff looks like compared to a principal of one of our elementaries.
it's something that we're very aware of. And
Okay,
we're-
all right,
Yeah,
okay.
we're looking at what that support might look like. We work very closely with the special ed team as well, and Sarah's team. We have various staff there. There's lots of staff doing lots of, so we're trying to look at coordination of efforts, and we always kind of have our ear on exactly what you're sharing.
I don't want to kill Erin.
Yeah, we don't either.
I really like Erin, I don't want us to kill Erin, so that's.
And I don't want Erin to leave, because you're overworking her.
Sure.
We like her.
That's
Yeah.
something just like with our buildings when we have additional kids in first grade, for instance, we staff the classroom and we have to keep an eye on kind of where we are with
Okay.
appropriate staff.
So you guys are talking about,
Mhm.
that's, I just wanted to make sure you moved down, I was like, wait, no, I really want to know, because I'm worried about that, because it's like, we don't want her to be a victim of her own success here, so.
Sure. Okay, Ron, you
All
ready?
right. thank you for Portrait of a Learner. I had a chance to talk to staff last week, and I just want to point out they really liked that it went from Portrait of a Graduate to Portrait of a Learner. At the elementary level, they thought it was a whole lot better, just in terms of what a kid at that age understands. Like, they're not thinking about graduation at that point. And
That was good calling your part.
they really liked that. No, that was you guys. And the other thing I think is going to work really well is this idea of 6 C's. I think we've had that long enough, and it's this idea that we're not going to necessarily add one more thing or one new thing to these people. They kind of understand the 6 traits at this point. So I think when we roll that out through the portfolio and all these other programs, it makes sense. So I kind of feel like it was an easier launch to make because it was something that was kind of familiar to them. So I appreciate that.
Have you made any edits based on our earlier
Yes.
feedback? Okay.
Yeah, so, and I'll show you in 1 second.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Because I was gonna say, I wanted to circle back on that just to.
so that was that. In terms of career readiness, it's been a lot of fun this year to kind of I really like taking a systematic approach and making it K-12 because it's easier to see every part of it and how we kind of can bring it together. This year, actually no, for the last 3 years, we've worked with Edward Clapp about Maker Center Learning and rooted elementary media and career readiness, Maker Center Learning, library sciences, and every time, library sciences and literacy. You always forget one. Every time. I did it earlier today and I forgot Maker Center Learning. But this was really nice because we've done it for 3 years. They've grown, they've been able to present, build through, and really make their media curriculum a whole lot more engaging, relevant, and awesome for kids. This year we expanded it to 6-8 and actually 9-12, which was an add-on. I don't even think we added it here. 9-12 media actually came to visit Edward Clapp when we got together and talked about Maker Center Learning. So Stacy and Tony joined, which was awesome. We're actually going to, and they bought in so much, we're going to try to create a Maker Center space in each of them, each of the libraries. Stacy, who I've known for a long, long time, but took a survey for the kids, and she had 400 kids respond about what they want to see in Maker Center Learning, our Maker Center. So I thought that was really cool to see. So we're kind of building it that way. At some point, I think we'll show the staff and like kind of let them walk through. I think one of the things we're looking for is to have every staff go through some of these experiences and see what to do. Rich walked into our thing when he was here, and we were doing a whole construction build on, and it revolved around like belonging. So I think it's kind of cool that we can take this stuff and attribute it to a lot of the other big like ideas that we have in class. So that's that part.
How does the work we're doing in Makerspace, how is that getting shared out to parents, or in what ways do kids share out their work? Because the more we see about this, the more important it is that I be able to demonstrate and explain what I'm doing and walk through the
I
process.
think, and that was interesting, we were talking about
beyond the electronic
100%.
portfolio.
And this is maybe talking about, I'm going to jump ahead
Okay.
to computer science to come back to
Just
it.
come back to it then. That's
No,
fine.
it's this idea, and I think we really need to, like, not only telling our staff about it and having them run through experiences, because when you get to, and like Rich, sorry, I'm calling you out on this, like he's cutting up cardboard and making like this football, like,
Three-dimensional.
three-dimensional.
It was really good,
and like they were doing that, and it was like great to see, because you could walk in and instantly feel like validated and like get to show off your thing. I think we have to do the same thing with both computer science, which we'll talk about in a second, and that. Like have a parent night, have them do it, and just build, create, construct, and talk about it. It's a blast, I think.
I think it's very different than noting it in your electronic portfolio. Like I think that being able to present it out to somebody and walk through your reasoning and demonstrate that to our parents, if the parents see it, I'm super happy to hear that.
It's, and this is just, I don't know, this is just one, but I think this idea of what media could be, I think kids are looking very forward to it. And they want to get in there and they want to, like, it's just see it and experience it. Like I was even walking through Barnard yesterday, and like all these different, in the main centrum there, all these different setups of what's happening is just awesome to see. And they're relating it to the curriculum if need be and if it fits in. And I like the idea of the parents and the kids getting to experience it.
I mean, it's exactly how they talked about the learning they love the most. when we did our interviews for Portrait of a Learner. I mean, you're describing exactly what the kids said was most valuable to them.
And I think I'm gonna jump ahead to Zello, which is our career readiness thing, and I do wanna, can I try to do?
Yeah. While you're doing that, so we had a chance this morning to do, we met with the computer science facilitator from Oakland Schools this morning, and she kind of helped our elementary staff, our elementary media staff think about what's the current state of our programming. And it's pretty cool how they're connecting it back to our curriculum. So in second grade, a project has always been to make the Troy community, and typically they use construction paper. But in the media center, they actually made it out of like cardboard. And then what are the cars called that they programmed? They programmed cars to drive through the community. And then some kids made their community in, is it Minecraft?
Minecraft, and they had their neighborhood into that, and to
Yes.
show, and then they would talk about the different roles that each community should have, and
Yeah.
how they.
So it's just interesting how they took something and made it, added more choice, added more, why did I say deep learning? So it's pretty exciting.
And so, one of the things in Zello, so this is Zello, this is our career readiness, and I have a couple different ones that I want to show. But career readiness, this is our thing that we give all kids, and they walk them through. And it gets more advanced, clearly, as you get older, and it builds on one another. And I thought it was very interesting what you were saying there, Carl, because one of the tests that all 7th graders take is how do you learn? And they have this whole quiz, kids ask all the kids questions, and then it turns them on an algorithm. So I always guess, because when you're walking, you guess, and like, oh, what's everybody gonna learn? And I'm thinking, okay, everybody's gonna be visual, like in my, like visual, you know, oh, they watch YouTube and all that. Overwhelming, like over 70% of all kids are like tactile. When you ask them and they raise their hand, it's like using their hands and like doing. And to see that is just amazing to me, because then it goes back to what Maker Center Learning and what the Media Center could be, like the kids doing. Like not just talking about the neighborhood, but we're gonna construct it, then we're gonna code the car to go through it and not hit any houses. And I like that. And this is what, to jump ahead a little bit, this is what Zello looks like for the kid. So one of the things we took is, this is a 12th grader, so clearly it's more built out. I'll show you a 7th grader in a second. But they take a thing on personality, and this is a little thing on auditory, what kind of learning they do, and then their preferences, what they want to do after high school, what sort of careers clusters they're built through, skills, interests, volunteer options, experiences, careers they like. They always put way more skills than they should. And interests, but that's good. And then places they've been, but also here, what careers they're interested in and what schools they're interested in. To me, if you look at this K-12, like listen to the stuff you guys were talking about before on what comes next, Zello is incredible in what it provides kids, and like it gives you such a breakdown of the schools, the careers, and everything else that I told the kids, don't Google things, just go on here, you've used it every year, and dig in this way. It tells you how to get in, cost, kids per class, what it's even like, quotes, and I just like this idea of it grows every year with the kids. Like, just to give you an idea, I know it's going to look not as fun, but this is a 7th grader, right? They haven't done the personality test yet. They've done the visual. He's a visual auditory learner, but they add stuff and it builds throughout. So there's that, and this kid is showing me, like, these are the things they're interested in. They give you little algorithms of what you might like. It kind of churns out a thing that says, you might like to do that. And then the schools they can get into, or they can find more information about. And it's all built right in. Like, let's take adult ed teacher. If you click on adult ed teacher and scroll all the way to the bottom, it does salary, what your job's like, what you do every day. I'm like, guys, it's always depressing. You're not gonna like it. But then at the bottom, it goes into majors, and then the majors click over, so you can go to the school, click Central Michigan, and then it'll explain that major, how hard that major is, what it would take to graduate, and it's just like a completely robust program that builds over time. in terms of career readiness, I just think it's a great program that we can kind of build upon and like expand on.
So my challenge on this is that in listening to the kids talk, they see Zello as this sidecar. It's got nothing to do with what I do in the classroom every day. And so, like, I was ready to, before this even came up, I was gonna say, what I'm gonna keep asking over and over again is show me how we're connecting the classroom work to the real world and what they're gonna do next. Because that's what I think historically we have not done well, and I'm really looking in the short term to see us get that into the curriculum, not as a sidecar, but integrated into the curriculum.
So I think there's two parts of it, sorry.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's important to know is just the structure of how Zello has been used at least for the last 5 years in Troy, and Rich could speak to what it looked like before, but it was outsourced when the counseling when our counseling team was shrunken down.
Yep.
I would guess 2011 is when those cuts happened here in Troy. That was kind of in line with budget components. And our career development facilitators run Zello. And so these are folks who work in our buildings. They're paid for through grant funds, and they do not have the relationship with our kids that teachers do on a regular basis. So it has lived separately for a long time. So one of the things that Ron has been very active in is partnering with Charlie Tall at who was at Larson.
Yeah,
The structure of Charlie's job has changed over the last 2 years, where we've been able to use career readiness funds to release him, to be able to collaborate more with Ron, to be able to run our programming when it comes to Zello differently at our middle schools as a test to see if we can get more student interest in it, learn more about our programming when it comes to career readiness. So we haven't solved it, but I think we named the same things you named. How do we make this more a part of the daily experience that kids use so that by the time they're in high school, they are fluent in it? They're not just saying, it's over here. So.
Yeah, but I don't even, Zello to me is a nice tool.
Yeah.
I don't care about Zello. What I want to know is when I'm learning algebra, am I learning about the careers or learning how I use this in the real world? And then when I understand that now as a kid, I'm fluent in Zello, so I go, ooh, civil engineer, that's really interesting. Now I'll jump over to Zello and I'll explore that. My concern is the disconnect happens before Zello. And that's what the kids will tell us over and over again, is that I'm sitting here day to day and I don't know why I'm in this class. I don't know what this is. What does this have to do with me and what's happening
And
next?
part of that is like even with the math curriculum that we adopted, so some of those changes are taking place in the curriculum.
Right.
But they're probably.
I want evidence of that in other subjects across years, not just middle
Yeah.
school math. That's what I'm asking for. You're exactly right.
And
The
I think so.
Probably
Last
the
week,
process and you like it to happen much faster.
Well, of course. Tomorrow. But that's an area where I feel like we should be able to move quickly on that. Like that, knowing that that's so critical, that's an area that shouldn't take us 10 years to figure out how to, our teachers should be able to tell our kids why they're in the class, right? That seems like a really basic thing to me.
go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I want to add on to that. When we talk to the kids in high school about the portrait of a graduate thing, they were talking about, I want to get here. Like if Zello tells them that that's what they want to go there, and that's what they're thinking of going there. But how do they get there? As in, like, what classes should they take to try and get there, kind of thing.
So is that something that Zello, if it doesn't suggest it, if a student says, I want to be a doctor, does that have the ability to say these
Yeah.
are the important steps?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna, two parts on
There's
this.
42 questions
I know.
there. Do you remember all
And
of them?
I'm gonna go. So, big, this is, and I've talked with these guys about this. Supposedly, and I reached out to Zello about this last spring, there is a Zello plug in the Power School that supposedly allows scheduling to be like influence connected through Zello. It's in the works. That's on my like longer term. I think that's in their project. Like I think that we would have to tie classes to the path, but that's possible. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. That is on my list of things. If we pull that out, cheers. And the other thing is, I met with counselors last week at the middle school, and I said, okay, here's the thing. Here's some other stuff. Here's how we get a better picture of the kid. You know, through Schoology, Zello, the portfolio, and Power School. There's a better picture of the kid in Illuminate. What else? And they came back with feedback that was like, okay, in the class, how do we, much like what you said, like how do we get prompts? And I told Charlie about this. Let's create some prompts that we can have teachers maybe answer in their class to kind of get this connection a little more to.
Yeah, 'cause to me, this is a teacher function, not a counselor function.
Yes.
This is an integration of this idea that I'm helping the kids move to what's next. So, okay, you're
And the second
You're
part,
ahead of me.
sorry, and one other part to that is, shoot, you got me as soon as you said that.
While you're thinking of it.
Yeah, go.
I think we are presenting it, kind of couching the presentation as we have the accountability plan after the achievement scores, because this is more of an authentic way of looking at assessment, the way we want kids to be more of a whole picture of
Yeah.
who they are versus just an SAT score or whatever. This is an important way that they're assessing themselves. We showed that when we were talking to Coach for Graduate, and how we can help better kind of inform what they're doing on a more holistic basis. Did you think of it yet?
Yes, I like the holistic a lot. I was going to say that earlier. I was thinking, and that to me, like not only for counselors and teachers to get a better holistic idea of what it is, but their own student. So we added career readiness to the portfolio this year. Actually, this week, knock on wood, this week or before Thanksgiving, Larson parents are going to get a thing from Zello where they can sign up for Zello Parent, which is the first time that we've ever had parents been able to see this of their own kid. So that should be cool. One other district in Oakland County does it. So, and they said that it got great, like 50% traction immediately. And I was, well, we'll try that. So we're gonna do
We're
that.
gonna get 70.
I know, we gotta beat them with the graph. So that's one of the things we're gonna do. We're also gonna tie it to their little portfolio. We're under kids, and we're doing this in middle school. Career readiness is under All About Me now. We're gonna have them add that shared portfolio, or I'm sorry, shared profile to the portfolio as well for the kid. This is all to say that the big launch, and I'm kind of going through, is like we're up to 6,504 portfolios that kids have made. Our goals are 3 through 9 right now. We're actually presenting to the Athens staff tomorrow, which is really awesome. We've met with Athens teachers, some Athens teachers and Stacy as well to kind of see how we can ramp it up from 9 upwards. But right now we're going to show them like the different things that the kids can add and go through. Like these are just a couple. Okay, some of these middle school probably because they get to change it. But like the idea of them adding their code, them adding a reflection. This is science and engineering. There's some pictures. Like this is our hope of every kid. 8th grade project in math. There's social issue book clubs.
There's some great agency there
And
ownership.
And so this is each kid, and we do a thing called WordPress Wednesdays on early release days where each teacher's giving the kids 10 minutes, and we have a prompt kind of that we give all the kids and say post something that you're really proud of and reflect on it. What'd you like, what'd you not like, and how can we improve it? And we have all kids do this. This is our ask in 9th grade as well. In terms of the elementary, we're having the media specialists get the kids ready by having them post 4 times until they get comfortable posting themselves. Basically, we tell elementary it's a kid version of Seesaw. Seesaw was the program where a lot of, if you're, like you get a lot of stuff from the teacher. This is the kid doing that stuff instead. So we're having 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade kids post their own work.
So have you had any conversations about sort of, not terminal points, but check-in points or presentation points? Or I mean, ask to succeed is an obvious one, but are you starting to think about
100%.
how do we turn this into from an individual exercise into an opportunity to practice?
Go.
I'm being patient. I guess a couple things, and I think we chatted about this. Nicole, you went to San Diego, right? So we saw a school that really integrated. They didn't have the electronic Zello. They were using cards and that kind of thing. But to me, where we go wrong with this is that, and I think Amina brought this up, kids too much focus. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a fireman. And the piece of this, to me, that is so powerful, and I guess I'm interested in how we do this, is that the kids' understanding of kind of what their own inclinations, skill sets, and interesting competencies are. Because that way you get kids, if a kid knows their tendency is I'm a creator, or I'm an analyst, or, you know, and I think Zello uses those kinds of things, then they don't have to restrict themselves to, you know, okay, I'm gonna be, you know, I only know how to do this in healthcare. You know, the school that we visited told a very interesting story because and this was an elementary school, and they had kids and their parents involved. And so, you know, there was one child who really assessed, you know, towards the leadership, you know, the leader, kind of a director type. And again, you might have naturally assumed, well, that kid's gonna go be a CEO in a corporation. He job shadowed his superintendent and all of a sudden realized, you know, you can be a leader in education, you can be a leader in business, you can be a leader in healthcare. The problem that I had, we did a little exercise with this. Danielle Clifford came in and we did it with Women of Tomorrow. And those girls immediately, you know, jumped to an occupation. And it's an occupation because it's an occupation they heard of.
Yeah.
And we, I think, do our kids a disservice if we jump them too quick into occupations. They need to understand what is, and I think Zello does this beautifully in terms of those archetypes. And so kids, we need to spend time with kids doing that kind of self-discovery so that they very early on understand that archetype, and then, you know, as they're going through classes, you know, they can do that experimentation around, you know, what is the right direction. You know, I think about this would stop many parent paying college tuition for a kid who thinks they want to be something, only to find out after they've been trained or well into their, you know, college education, I don't really like that stuff. And, you know, we can meld it in with the you know, the internship program, but I really think it goes back to spending the time early on, letting kids go on that kind of self-discovery journey about what are the archetypes that, you know, and not everybody is only one, but what are their preferences? And I think Zello does a really good job. When we ran the Women of Tomorrow girls through that, that was really insightful for them of, you know, hey, I guess I really do like to do this kind of thing. And then there's, you know, 20 different directions you could go. So my interest is how do we do that kind of upfront work with kids? In this school that we went and visited, kids walked around. They did this day with their parents where they had a little badge on that said, you know, I'm a creator, or I'm an analyst, or.
And I think the hard challenge, I didn't put this on there because it's so minute, but like one of the things we've tried to do is, okay, skills. And so the 6 C's, the hardest part of the whole thing for, this might be, my thing is, getting the kids to reflect on what skill they did in that assignment. That is hard. Like to ask, we were asking 4th graders 2 days ago, all right, so you did this, what of these, you know, I can't even imagine my own 5th grader being like, well, you know, Dad, I was communicating and problem solving. Like, and that to me is the thing that we have to get these kids accustomed to. Like, what does it mean to be a communicator, and kind of breaking it down a little more.
Ron, I think that's the point though. That's
Yes.
that we've paired Zello with the 6 C's that the board has identified, and they will begin to reflect, will begin to reflect with them about those traits and those assessments that we've had in place are really thorough, and it helps them to think about themselves as a learner and their next step. So I think it's situated appropriately with that. With Zello just being a tool, our key result, our objective is not Zello, to your point, I think. It's about, you know, having those students kind of self-reflect.
But I do think Zello does a really nice job with those, I don't know, there's 7 or 8 archetypes that, you know, over time, as kids start to go through some of the assessments, you know, about where their interests are and so on, they will start to get a sense of, you know, I'm more of a creator than I am an analyst. You know, and that is really important for them to understand, because if I'm a creator and I think I'm gonna go be a CPA, you know, that may not be a good job fit for me.
The only, I just hope it wouldn't start this thing too early. I don't like this idea of pigeonholing, even if you're a 4th grader as an analyst, or is it this or that, because I think
It is, because you're multiple assessment over time, so they can kind of see how they grow. But it gives them a framework to think about instead of saying, I'm gonna be a doctor. You know, and then they go all the way through and they find out, I don't really wanna be a doctor.
You wanted to jump in too?
I think Zilla was a really cool tool, but I also think sometimes, like when we talk about not wanting to add on to the staff, I think sometimes we have to be really careful because kids feel like it's just there's one more thing I have to do, I have to have 85 posts. And so I think allowing there to be the glide path piece, like, and I know that's your vision for it, and so, just as we continue to, just so that it doesn't, like, this is.
I don't want it to be not fun.
Yeah,
You know.
and realizing too, like, even like, you get kids, so many of these kids are tactile, and then they're like, but I have to keep doing all this digital stuff, and so, like, allowing them to have some room so that there's stuff that's getting archived is not necessarily always.
Yes.
And I'm not.
No, we had that conversation with saying.
Well, and that's, I'm sure you're having it, so I just want
Yeah.
to kind of voice it here as you make decisions that maybe.
I think,
complicated.
and I want to go back to one thing. I think the goals are, somebody said, like, I don't want to say the capstone, but this kind of really started with 8th grade ELA teachers that did interviews, and they still do interviews, and this has kind of just gotten bigger than that. And that idea of bringing their best work and having people from the community, their teachers, parents, interview them about why this was important to them, that's what it leads to in the middle school. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so successful, because there is that end goal there that it's built through, but now it's, I don't want to say tested, but.
No, but they get to talk about it and present on it.
Yep.
That's, I mean, I don't want to lose sight of having it.
100%.
And I know that that's your heart, so I know that.
I think one of the things when I think about like all the learning we've done with our outside partners, as we think about implementing a curriculum where the teacher's not standing at the front of the room anymore, and now the teacher is freed up to observe the students, to give the students feedback. I think about how one of the things we've learned is like, it's the role of teacher to help and to breathe some of those identities into kids. So you're the type of writer who really cares about organization. You did so excellent by having your piece have a beginning, a middle, and end. Is organization important to you in other parts of your life? Gosh, it's such an important skill. So that is the work of implementing the 6 C's, is helping our teachers have a sensitivity to the students in front of them. I just think that we're at sort of the very beginnings, and I think that connects to career readiness. Noticing in noticing in Math 6 when they're doing the geometry unit, oh my gosh, do you know who does this type of work? I notice you're so good at this type of work, and you seem to be really passionate about it. The type of people who do this, they might have this job and this job.
Right.
Like, I think those are sort of the incidental things.
Yes.
But by incidental doesn't mean that that we can assume that that's the type of thing that's happening, or that teachers don't need to learn how to do that. So freeing up teachers in the front of the room, there's a new skill set to be built in many ways. And so I just think, that's part of the implementation that we have to be aware of needs to happen.
Well, skill set and a lot of training, because I personally wouldn't assume that a teacher who teaches English is gonna know what all the potential careers are for somebody who's, successful in that. Like, that would not be my.
For sure. I think though, just as we kind of move forward with the green color, just a huge credit to Ron and Natalie, in all seriousness, that the capacity building that's happened throughout our organization, the complete overhaul of media, for instance, we used to have, remember we did that whole reform in terms of Media 2.0 and how we've really lifted that work from K to 12 now. It's really incredible to be able to even have this conversation in terms of what our kids will be kind of now self-reflecting on it and have that systemness throughout. I think it's important. We're now talking about how that CT piece or the career readiness piece is woven all K through 12. So
Yeah, I think our
it's a
excitement
huge
over the stuff
celebration.
we've done drives this conversation. This is not like, oh, come on, Ron, why don't you have this done yet? But it's like, okay, this is so focal to like some of the largest gaps I saw in those interviews. And it was like, so it's like, okay, this area of making that connectivity happen is so critical that I think that's what drives any of us who are in those classrooms, and you're like, okay, we've got an area here we got to really work on, so it's great to see this launch. And I think all of these comments in here all just reflect how important
That
it is
work
to
has
us.
set a foundation for us to think differently
Yeah.
about
But
that.
you know, you could, I mean, kind of to follow up a little bit on what Natalie said, you could very well see a teacher saying to a child something like, you know, I've noticed your problem-solving skills are really strong and you're very organized. And then using that as a mechanism, because
Yes.
those are skills and competencies, to at some point, you know, drive them back to Zello to say, you know, so it identifies the skill. I'm a good problem solver, and I'm organized. And then this system allows you to search on competencies instead of
Yeah.
immediately assuming I'm a good problem solver, I'm gonna be an engineer or whatever. Because then you can go in, there's a
Right.
ton of occupations that, you know, you need to be organized, you need to have good problem solving skills. So I can see the teacher, you know, as they're developing, you know, as they're working more one-on-one with students, of helping them name skills.
Yeah.
They don't need to tell them careers,
Right.
but if they help the child understand and get a sense of what skills they see being demonstrated in the classroom, and then through this a child said, you know, I really am, I'm a good problem solver. I should probably look at a job that is going to allow me to be a problem solver. Then I think that helps bring clarity, and it doesn't put the onus of being a career counselor,
Right.
you know, on every teacher, but they can help children identify skills and competencies that they have through their coursework.
And I think it's predictable what Ron's describing, that we're just starting this and the kids are like, I don't know, let's collaborate. Like, it's the teacher is helping to support and pointing out, and as our teachers, you know, become more in tune, then there's a sensitivity to, oh my gosh, you just demonstrated citizenship. Have you noticed that as a theme across this unit? And it becomes more,
Alive.
yes.
So, if you end up with a skill set going one way and halfway through the semester, I want to do this instead, or next year, I thought you wanted to do this last year, and now your peers, your parents, your uncle, your neighbor, hey, we got something here for you that you might be, and everything starts to zigzag. How do you slow down the zigzag?
So it's interesting that we have the kids, like, let's take seventh graders, right? In sixth grade, they put an interest in the skills down. And we said to all seventh graders, let's take a look at sixth grade. And that's like, do you still like horses?
That's like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
That's 4 years, right? Yeah.
And that was,
I said that.
and that's an interesting thing, like telling these kids to like
Teaching them how to
focus and like guide it a little more to something that they're good at. And we talk about it. Like, I think the one problem that I struggle with is they always look at salary. Like, immediately, you know, they are just like, well, anesthesiologist. Sounds good to me. And it's like,
Yeah, I was going to say exactly to your point. Yeah.
it's like this conversation you have to have with the kids, like, do what you're, I've said this so many times at this point, do what you're good at, because then hopefully you'll be paid well for that. And then that's in interest and skills, and that sort of thing, know it. And I think the thing we say about some of the quizzes they have to take, they kind of better learn who they are, is the more you answer that honestly, the more it's going to paint a better picture of that career. Like, are you sure, like for example, like lawyer, when we ask the kids, like, oh, and somebody's like, I want to be a lawyer. I'm like, so you want to read and write? Like, let's, you know what I mean? Like, let's make sure that that is the kind of skill and interest that you have.
But my dad's a lawyer, my dad's a doctor, my dad's a house painter, and that's what I want to do. Now you're getting kind of boxed in, but your focus is now, here is your skill set, not your mom and dad's, or their desires for you to be a doctor or something. What do you want to do? And this is how you raise that.
Yeah, you know, we
I
see
think
that.
there's only so much we can do though, right? So if
if a parent is insisting on a particular thing, then that's what they will pay for college, you know, I think there's a balance, right? There's a limit, between, you know, realistically parent expectations and I'm not saying that it wouldn't be ideal that every child is completely aware of themselves and when they leave our schools are then free to go and explore whatever they, you know, whatever they want, they're gonna be fully supported. So I do think, I understand what you're saying, but
But
Well,
if you know your archetype, I can tell you, my mom says I have to be an engineer. But if I know I'm a creator, or if I know I'm an analyst, I can, you know, you can go get an engineering degree. But you can, I mean, there's enough variation in most of these fields that, you know, again, it's really knowing about what you want to do.
I'm not saying we shouldn't pursue that, but we do always, there is gonna be a limit to how far we
Sure,
can go.
but we
Oh,
don't-
sure. Yeah, right,
But
so,
it's-
But it's something
Yeah.
versus
helping
a lot of
students
time, yeah.
understand, you know, what their interests and capabilities.
I think the tap-in of the parent module is really cool, because that's a subtle way of helping the parents understand that maybe their kids are not like them.
So we'll report back as we move forward. in
Yeah.
terms of-
Says the man who wants to know.
So, as a reminder, 3 more of these to get through.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
We should probably mix up the order, because I feel like the poor green pillar gets attacked, because we have all of our energy, and then by the last pillar, we're all like, yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I have a few too, so I'm good.
Yeah, honestly, like I said, I think Green Pillar, I attack Green Pillar because that's, in the interviews, it's like, that's where I saw our gap as an organization, was like, it's.
That's what we're working on.
And that's really cool to
it's a
see all
lot of
this and
energy
understand-
around, and
yeah.
there's a lot of potential, and just to acknowledge that, Ron, thank you for the work that you're doing with our
Yeah,
groups.
it's very exciting. It really is. And I mean, and even to that, to Gary's point about even having the parent module, to now having a possibility of a parent being able to actually see. So I love it. Okay, we'll move on.
All right, so welcome to Sarah.
Run, all
Sarah in her new role, and Chantel probably feeling that she's still new in her role. Sometimes I still feel new here, so.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
So Chantel and I kind of took over the Red Pillar captains the middle of last school year, and we've been working on just continuing. You've seen those 3 objectives that are up on the screen. Before, just focusing in on how we're attending to the needs of the whole child consistently in alignment across the district. Some of our celebrations from June until now are the SEL curriculum expansion. So last school year we started a pilot. You kind of see the triangle up there representing MTSS. So you'll see Tier 1 has been a focus for SEL in terms of working with our principals on some curriculum. We've been using everyday speech at the elementary level. We had we had 4 buildings who piloted various teachers, gen ed teachers, elementary level last year. This year, we have about 25 who we've actually purchased the full year of that curriculum for. They wanted to use it for all school years, so that's great. We also have several other teachers who are piloting it across the elementaries. At the secondary level, we have purchased Navigate 360, which has a system called Suite 360 that kind of our principals have been using, are just starting to dabble in that, but it has some nice components that they think they'll be able to use as, it has some Tier 1 teaching components, but it also has some tiered components, for example, for like an alternate to suspension for a student in terms of disciplinary or consequence for certain behaviors. And then we've continued to do some restorative practices with our students and with our staff, and Chantel has led a lot of that work. So that, go ahead.
how do we define restorative?
So when we talk about restorative, it's really about doing the work around mindset shifting, but also having those conversations with students, as well as looking at what that support looks like for our buildings, our staff, our our building leaders, our teachers. And so when we talk about our restorative practices work, we're also thinking about what that looks like along the lines of restorative justice work as well. And so it is about making sure that we have clear definitions about what that looks like, communicating that out to families when we talk about disciplinary things and thinking about alternative ways to approaches to talking to students when we have harmful things come up in our buildings, if we have incidents where maybe harmful language was used, or there have been some, which has been kind of an uptick in some of the areas, we'll do like informal conferences around that, but they're more so restorative sessions where the students feel like that they are in spaces where they can reflect and lean into the learning, having the conversations of why this was harmful, how we can move forward with that, and what they can do to be agents of the change and of that restorative work. Also thinking about ways to streamline this for training for our building leaders, our teachers, and then thinking about how that continues. So not just stopping it 1 year, but thinking about how that continues every single year. But defining it does start first with that communication part of what that looks like.
Do we have any room for restitution practices within restorative justice? Because I feel like so language, right? Like if a kid uses derogatory language towards someone, and then they have to self-reflect and learn and all of that, which is important work. It's important work.
Yes.
But I don't know that that necessarily does anything to make the victim of that feel better.
That's the restoration
So
part.
to me, restorative means that I'm actually like doing.
Repairing.
I'm making effort to repair. Like, and I'm not just like, yep, I learned, but like I have to take a step that might not be comfortable for me to restore, the restitution, to restore, to repair, to bridge build. Like, I'm worried that we're limiting, and I do, as someone who spends a lot of time helping people do their own work, I'm not minimizing the effort that goes into doing your own work, but I don't want to give kids the cop-out of like, yeah, but I used a bad word, like, and I mean, I watched a teacher in action last week where a situation happened and the kid was like, I'm sorry, and the teacher was like, it's great that you're sorry, but I'm much more interested in considering how this is not going to happen again. And so how are do we have steps in place to really make sure that this isn't just about doing your own work matters.
Yes.
But if we really want to, I mean, I think about all of our schools if we're trying to be national schools of character all over, it's not just doing your own work, it's also putting it out there too. So are there conversations that are happening about how to take it to that next?
There are definitely conversations happening. One thing that I do want to share is even when we're having these conversations with students, for example, one of the last pieces, which is still a beginning piece, is how do we move forward from here, right? What is our next step? So it's written, there are written reflections that we have. Students are also thinking about that. We are sitting with building leaders and talking about what that looks like, and then we're having larger conversations about what is our next steps, like how do we not only implement the learning, but to also implement the change, right? So intent matching our impact.
I think
Now,
it's
is that
important.
getting
There's
codified
five-
into our codes of conduct?
Yes. So there's five key areas there's five key questions in restorative
Yes.
practices. So when you're trained, for the person who caused the harm there, what happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since?
Yes.
Who has been affected by what you have done and in what way? And what do you think what do you think you need to do to make things right?
Yes.
And so it's not just your own learning and work.
Right.
It is getting to that point of how are we restoring the community? How are we restoring those pieces?
And from a procedural perspective, that last question, is that optional for the person, or is it in the code of conduct, is it you have to do that last thing? It's not,
So that's a great question, Carl, and I think that's the work that we're doing in our organization, understanding that restorative practices, though that's something we want to live into with discipline and is a component of our code of conduct, has to be partnership with, there has to be a willingness for you to engage in that work, also with your parents, right?
Right.
Because, you know,
If you want to be
but-
part of the community, you,
So
yeah.
oftentimes we extend, this is a restorative approach to this work. It requires a commitment all the way to this level. And families may say, I'm not interested in that level.
Yes.
We then engage in punitive consequence, right? So like, that's often what happens, right? So you engaged in a fight, the typical traditional consequences for fighting are 5 days of suspension, out of school. We'd like to engage you and Marie in a conversation about why you go through this process. Are you willing to do that? We can reduce that number. The number probably doesn't ever go down to 0 when it comes to things like that, but we reduce that number, we try to repair the relationship. But sometimes that doesn't happen.
So if we have a discipline issue and people refuse to participate in the restorative piece, we can't force them.
Right, I mean, we have to create safe environments. So yes,
Yeah.
there's a certain level of where it's not optional, but at the restorative level, it might not happen. Right, there are times in which,
Sure.
we have students who have no interest in
That's
repairing
Troy
a
Youth Assistants,
relationship.
people get
Right.
referred and the kids are like, no, I'm not gonna do it,
Right.
you know? Okay, but that's codified, that's what we have, okay.
So I,
In the staff.
I have this might be or might not be the place, so I'm wondering how and if we look at curriculum and what and how we're teaching kids as it relates to equity and well-being. So there is the, there is the things that set a general tone. To me, looking at well-being in these issues and, this is something that I brought up, looking at, for example, it's Thanksgiving, right? And I'm sure still at the elementary level, we still have kids coloring sheets where there are lovely Thanksgiving scenes of Native Americans and pilgrims celebrating, right?
We actually worked really hard to take those
Yeah.
pieces out, and we do share with teachers like about the week before, like
On the regular,
remember do's and don'ts, just for that specific example. So that is.
Yeah, so so I just use that as a specific example because it's that time period. But I think as we're looking at our curriculum, especially at our social studies curriculum, as things are changing. And so the one thing that is also, very timely is there are big events that happen that are outside of the control of our district. So how much work and focus, specifically, right now there's a war in the Middle East that discussions about that do come into our schools. And they are not, do we have, and they do impact the well-being of a lot of our students. And there's gonna continue to be big events that are gonna come. Do we have a way of dealing with that? I think there is one particular example, and this is, middle school building. This is a media class. This was about 10 days ago, where the teacher was doing a really, a well-intentioned presentation about showing how a particular video of Gaza being bombed was fake news, right? And so this video happened to be a compilation of a video game and actual footage, but it was not put into context. So there was no explanation that this is actually something that's taking place. There is no comparison of a video that says, this is a fake video, this is a real video. So it's not the showing of the video, it's a very difficult and complicated situation that can leave a lot of students feeling very uncomfortable. And so this is a situation where it could have been used for really good deep learning, right? Like, this is a fake video. This is a real one. And if we're going to talk about a very difficult subject, we need to be able to discern what is real and what is not. So, you know, and I know this is, like, this particular topic is not one that people want to talk about, and it's not just about this, but I think big events are going to keep happening, right? And they're going to affect a lot of our students in lots of different ways. And so I think we need to have a strategy of how to deal with it, you know, even from the initial communication to staff, initial communication to the community, a conversation with the teachers, right? Because, you know, an atmosphere can be created where students, one, don't feel comfortable speaking up, and feel like, I think that's the gist of it. So I think it's, you know, it can be from the easy to remove, like the, you know, like the pictures of Native Americans celebrating but I think as we're, you know, especially as we do curriculum review, I think we have to really look at it, not just through, you know, a deep learning lens, but we really have to look at whatever new curriculum, I think especially as it relates to like ELA and social studies and those types, we have to look at it through this lens. And then another part of that, and what I'm wondering is, you know, talking about not just the restorative practices, but, you know, how students feel. So are we taking, especially I think at like the middle school and the high school level, I think more complex issues are going to feel very differently at the elementary and middle school and high school level. Are we taking the opportunity to reach out to students and get real-time feedback of how they're actually feeling? And so, you know, this time it could be more in the Middle East, next time it might be a school shooting, a time after that it might be something that's happening here as well. So do we have a way to get a response from students kind of in real time when big things are happening that are going to affect their well-being? I know there's a lot to, yeah.
I do want to elevate the work of Chantal and Maria and Evan when we worked on those are things that bubble up, right? We have to help our staff be more culturally responsive. That's our work, you know, as a group. And I think that one way that has been very helpful is their collaboration to share staff and internal communication when we know things are coming up. For example, you know, certain celebrations, or we mentioned Thanksgiving, I'll just use that example, and the communication that you all had put out with resources and what's coming up that month. I think that is incredibly important to our principal group and to, you know, our teachers to be able to help build on their understanding. And in addition, we take deep learning and equity work. All of our work is ensuring equity for all. And I think that we take that into consideration in all of our curriculum that we're electing and that sort of thing. So I don't know if you want to speak to that. No, yeah, absolutely. So our most recent TSD Inclusive newsletter starts with a very beautiful statement about these very things. It kind of gives like this overarching view, and then it goes through, and it's a very culturally responsive newsletter, and it talks about the very things, it even lists the things that the teaching and learning department highlights specifically for this month, and the do's and don'ts of thinking about Thanksgiving. It gives a wonderful spotlight on Diwali. It talks about just culturally responsive things. It highlights the work that we're doing around unearthing joy. That's another piece. And then it goes through some other parts. So there are elements that it's showing up, but I am definitely taking note to think about when those times do arise and there's something else that comes up, how we can definitely incorporate that and embed that. And I know there are conversations happening across the board with that. I do want to jump back because it's going to speak to this part too. So the street data component that we're focusing on and IoT, which is something that we're going right into tomorrow morning, also speaks to.
We might still be here.
I
promise you
But the work that we're doing with our instructional leadership team speaks to those very things about looking at that street data, which are those lived experiences, and really the forefront and focus of that is elevating student voice and student agency and belonging. And so, now we can jump back to that other slide. And so this piece, what this is that we've spent a lot of time too thinking about the data we've already captured, but how we can bring our students along with us and thinking about how do we take, for example, the equity analysis survey data that we've captured over the last 3 years. This right here is the most recent compilation of an infographic that Hanover put together, which specifically looks at student-specific data and their voices, and then working alongside the Student Equity Council, for example, just using that leadership to say, here's the data that we've collected over the last 3 years of your peers, working alongside of you, what do you think, or where should we begin the work? Because we cannot move forward until we actually had the opportunity to look at that data and then actualize it into thinking about what they've already told us that they need and what we have not either touched or have not touched enough to really make sure that we're speaking to that. So this is why we.
Has this data been shared with the board yet? I haven't seen it. It looks like it's new. Is it? It's November 2023.
So this is an infographic piece. So this is actually something that was already shared in our longitudinal data that was shared out back in June. What we've asked them to do is just to synthesize it to only pull out all of the student perception data, so that when we're looking at it with students, we're saying this is what you said, and we're looking at it alongside you and with you. Can we develop some projects and initiatives to support?
I love this. I just would like to have it. That's all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would
So
Sure.
is this, because this came up at a couple of us wondered, so is this the Student Equity Council is active?
They are active, yes.
Okay, so how often do they meet? Is it
How many
like,
kids are
how
around
many
it?
kids? How are they
So right
chosen?
now,
All of that. Yeah.
so majority of them came and kind of sought out. The council right now is comprised of our high school students. We are recruiting. What they are working on, they actually just wrapped up filming with Thomas to do their introductory video to share out with One Troy. So that it's being worked on and everything. They meet roughly every 2 weeks, and they have just finalized what their first draft of their model looks like. They have just chosen, they finalized their co-chairs and they have ambassadors, but what they wanted to do is have that video to talk about, to introduce themselves formally to One Troy and what that work looks like. It's about 17 students. Right
Are
now.
they fairly representative of our various
They are
groups?
fairly representative. What we do need more representation of is IAE. However, our Student Equity Council leaders are the ones who are recruiting their peers. They are reaching out to them. They are really the forerunners in all of this. So we are just definitely supporting them, but they come to us and they hold us accountable. And they are a really wonderful group, and they can't wait to show this video and invite. So the plan is, once the video is finalized, we will be sending the invitation out for a formal meet and greet so that you all will be able to see the video, and then they will be able to formally introduce themselves. You all will be meeting them, and then we'll share that out with One Troy. So we're developing what that process looks like. But all of the building principals know that the council, every time I have front-facing time, I'm like, hey, the council's doing really great things, and they can't wait to meet with you and to really introduce themselves. And they are excited too about what it looks like to be partners in this equity work with middle and elementary students too. So they're peers. And also.
So in one of my sessions at MASB over the weekend, I had a board member from Ypsilanti say, you can't just go along with the okey-doke. We have to intentionally interrupt systems that put equity barriers in front of our kids. And I loved it, I wrote it down because it was like, and because I feel like we've gone quiet on this. And when we first kind of really launched heavily into our equity work, we were really unapologetic about it, recognized that we had work to do. And I'm concerned that it's become very quiet, and I know part of that is just, let's get down and get the work going. But I really, I want us to be unapologetic. So when you look at data like you just put up there, and I haven't been able to go through that data, when we have these updates moving forward, I would love it if you, when you come in, that you talk about, these are our gaps right now. These are our areas of focus. This is where we've identified those equity barriers that are in front of our kids. Because I think we need to say it, we need to name it, we need to recognize it so that we can start thinking about how to tear those barriers down. And I feel like if the work gets too quiet at the governance level, we don't know anything's happening. I didn't even know that the council had been formed, or that anything was going, and it's like, and I know you're working, and I'm like, but I want your work to see the light of day at this level, because when we started that work, you weren't here, but the microphones lit up, at our meetings. But we had two groups. We had groups saying, we don't need to stay out of this work, this isn't important. And then we had a large group of people also saying, my experience in the city is not your experience, and this is work we need to do. And I think that those people were looking to us to say, okay, you finally are hearing me, you're seeing me, and now we've gone quiet. And I hope, I don't want anyone in the city to go, or parents to say, that must have died a quick death in a committee somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So let's make sure that, your work sees the light of day.
And I would say, just because it's related directly to that, I think there are a lot of members of the community who would support a lot of this work, and so as you guys are doing this work, figure out where there might be a space for the community to jump in, because I think there are quite a few people who would be willing to support.
Your little hand is barely staying out.
Yes, quick question, comment. One of the things, you mentioned that part of the council is people seeking out to you and coming to you. One of the talks I listened to was from Dearborn School District. This was at NSBA, and they're very specific about who they reach out and get it. And they said sometimes if we let people come to us to form that, we don't always get the marginalized people or the people who are not speaking up. So it's important to be selective and seek out the people more.
The students are
than just
taking
get it.
responsibility to seek out those that are not represented.
Yes.
Like, for instance, at IA,
Yes.
the students are actually taking it upon themselves to seek others that need to be represented in this group. We need to get rolling.
Sorry.
So can we go to the group? I want to be respectful. I know we're going to be out early tomorrow. Let's jump to the gold pillar and
She's blue.
I was like, you're on, go.
Do your thing, Marie.
Do your thing, Marie.
Marie, I'll tee you up.
Okay.
Thank you, Marie.
What time
I
is
do
it?
want to. Yeah, we can wait for Marie now. I really want to just thank Marie for the work that she's been doing with our, this work will impact ultimately every single school building. And this is the beauty of working with our teaching and learning team, as you can see represented here. But this work is very complicated, and working with our spaces, both with, she's going to talk tonight about building out our process. We wanted you to see how inclusive our process has been in terms of playground and with furniture. And she's working at all the levels to do that. And so it's a lot of work to work with teacher groups, principal group, and with the bond folks as well. So Marie's going to talk about how inclusive our process has been, but she won't give herself credit, so I wanted to do so.
Nice. Well, thanks for this year. So yeah, in addition to all the fun science things, this has been like my favorite thing to do lately. So we've had two simultaneous projects working from last year. So
because we have the first 6 elementary buildings getting new playgrounds, they're gonna break ground this spring. We have engaged a group of, interested stakeholders in that conversation. And then at the same time, we've also been having the same conversation with furniture. So in furniture, we have the first 6 elementaries that are not getting playgrounds are getting new furniture next year. So that'll be installed and delivered this summer. And then we also have new furniture at Baker and at IEs. And so in order to engage in that process really thoughtfully with furniture, that first slide has like 5 billion things on it. What we did first was we reached out to who was interested in piloting. And so at the end of the day, we ended up with about 36 teachers, K-12, who are piloting furniture, so at all of the spaces. So every elementary, all 12 of them have teachers that are piloting furniture, and we have representatives from all grade levels. And then we also have 4 teachers at Baker piloting furniture and 4 teachers at IAD's piloting furniture. And they are in different content areas. So we have, math teacher, ELA teacher, science teacher, kindergarten teachers, all across the board, which has been great. We also have 2 ASD teachers at the elementary level who are piloting furniture. And then we also have a special ed teacher at Baker who's also piloting furniture. So that's been really great. Along the way, one of the cool things that they did in media last year was, depending on if you were a furniture building or a playground building, they had the kids in media design like what would their ideal playground be and what would their ideal like furniture world be, and so you can see some examples on there. And then what's been the most fun is with furniture, once we have that installed, we've been having meetings along the way where we've been doing learning, developing guiding principles for how we'll make these decisions around. And then those meetings have been like the most exciting conversations we've ever had with like a group of teachers across the board. Like,
And they're after school.
And they're after school. Yeah,
Yes,
right. They're like all in. Like they're the most dedicated people around this. And so what's been really fun is, at the beginning, people had one idea in their head of like what I think furniture does and how it can change space. And then we did an exercise with them recently where we did, the typical I used to think and now I think. And now I thinks, we were like, this works. This is so great. Like all their now I thinks were like, now I think that the students should be in charge of how we move furniture around the space. The students should like take agency. Movement is so important, so all of that's been really great. So the point where we are at now in furniture is that we have recommendations for all of the grade levels K-5 in terms of what would be like a typical package that we're putting together. There is a small element of teacher choice, and so our next step is to engage those first 6 buildings worth of elementary teachers in terms of like a little bit of learning and then a little bit of presenting. Here's what you're gonna kind of get, and here's where your choice lives. And that's gonna all happen before we go on Christmas break. So that's like in the next couple weeks. So we're gonna have some staff meetings at buildings. We're gonna have like office hours where they could answer some questions. And then the smart move along the way has been that principals have been having staff meetings, collaboration meetings, PTO meetings in these pilot spaces. So everyone's had a chance to like engage and move into it, and now we're just kind of balancing budget with our guiding principles, with everything that the teachers have experienced and learned from. So that's been cool. At the last, we'll skip to playgrounds, and then you'll just see another slide of like student input, which has been fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was.
Yeah, so that's fun. So playgrounds has been like a similar time frame. It's just been like a different level of engagement, but you can see up there some of the like student projects where they were, planning what they think an ideal playground is, and of course it was like a hot tub, but also they did a really smart move of engaging students in how to learn what does accessibility mean, because that's one of our like key guiding principles. And so the things that the kids came up with were just like incredible. Like they were like, well, I know I have my one friend and she's in a wheelchair, so we designed this so that she could go up here and she could access this, and it was really awesome to see. And they presented these to the architect team, so that was really fun and cool. And then we also surveyed parents at the first 6 buildings, so there were 526 parents who responded, and everything that they listed was really nicely in line with our guiding principles, so that was really affirming. From here, we had the playground architects, after we did some learning and some recommendations, they designed around what we thought were important guiding principles, and then from there, they cross-checked with principals, revisited that playground committee, and now at this point, they have some final designs and things to cross-check, and then those will also go out for bid. And then the next step on the building level is they'll get to decide a couple of things around like equipment pieces, color choices, and some final things there. So then they're on track as of now to break ground in the spring, and we shall see where that goes. And then the nice thing is everything that we're doing in the first 6 elementaries is just gonna be like flip-flopped, and we're not gonna go through the whole pilot process again. We did all the learning, we had everybody engaged, and now we'll just refine it a little bit. And then in terms of Baker and IA East, obviously they're not getting playgrounds, but they are getting furniture, so we're gonna go to the next slide. You can see there. Yeah, they would love playgrounds. This is just some examples of like where we've gotten some student input, but what's been really great is that we've gone in, interviewed kids in every single one of these pilot spaces, asked them what they want, what are their favorite pieces, how do they like to engage with the furniture, and then the next step at Baker and IA East is we've been kind of designing, this is what a math classroom might look like, and then here's how you as a math teacher can engage in what like an extra piece of choice might be, and then the like zoomed out next level is all of the spaces and all of those 6 buildings are getting touched with furniture in some capacity, and so now we're thinking, what might a cafeteria, revamp at Baker slightly maybe look like? What might it look like in Centrums at Hamilton, for example? And so that's where we've been like layering on all the pieces. And then finally, just as like a nice cross-check for us, whenever it comes to a space like a literacy specialist space, we've engaged like an important group of stakeholders. So we've said like, hey, let's gather some literacy specialists. What do we want to say as a district we believe is important and necessary for this space? And then let's replicate that in all the spaces. Same thing with like art classrooms and music classrooms, just so that we have everybody's voice in the room. So, yeah.
So the easiest thing to have done, I'm sorry, I think the easiest thing to have done is for Marie to have just said, or us to say, here's what we're buying. Good luck. But Marie's relationship with the other teaching and learning members who've been able to inform things like math storage or the things we're doing with our state libraries and things like that, and to be able to work with our teachers really closely on their specific spaces. So the learning has been incredible.
I was at MASB this weekend too, and one of the sessions I attended was about student voice. And we were talking groups and, how does your district get student voice? Well, I'm not quite sure. And so what I'm hearing a lot tonight is that we actually do have a lot of student voice. So I think it would be, and this might be a job for Kimberly, I think that this is something that, from time to time we should find a way to share with the broader community and with parents.
Yes, Thomas made a video of this process.
So we have a furniture video. So
There you
and we're looking at actually making another one. And here's actually a great point that you bring up, Amina, is so with our first 6 buildings with furniture, or first 6 elementaries with furniture, Baker and IA East, and then also with our playgrounds, we have decision time that's like, really intense right now, and then we have from now until the end of the year, where every one of these people who have been involved in these committees and these pilots have been really thoughtful of like, how do we get everybody else on board? And so what we think that looks like is, interviews with students, videos, having a PTO meeting where we, at this point now, here's their new playground, let's engage in some learning around that, and so we've been really thoughtful of like, right now we're in the what phase, like here's what we're getting, and now we're next going to live into the how phase, and that includes in our dream world, engaging parents, engaging all teachers, engaging the community in general, because we want to say, hey, you voted for this bond, look at how well we're using it and taking everybody's voice into consideration.
And parents, sometimes might not be
be aware that all of these things are taking
Right,
place.
right.
And so parents love it when they feel like their kids are contributing in a
Yeah.
meaningful way to,
Yeah.
you know, to a big project or, you know, something like that. But so I think, it would be good for all of us, you know,
Yeah.
so just to be more aware of
Yeah.
how our students are contributing.
Yeah, I was just gonna, so the, like, playgrounds, I know the various playgrounds in various buildings are in various levels of disrepair. And I know that PTOs have taken a lot of, you know,
Yeah.
certain PTOs have put a lot, so, is there a, like, is every playground gonna now look the same? Is there some movement and then just?
Yeah, you establish some
Yeah,
pieces.
so-
and-
Like,
They
newer
did-
pieces the
Yeah,
PTOs have
so
put
they
in.
did like a playground audit where they went through and they actually went through every single piece of equipment and they saw, does it fit with, you know, all of the new standards? Is it up to date? Is it something that's long lasting? So is it something that's brand new? Like I know there's a brand new climber, that was installed at Martel. Like they're gonna keep those existing ones. So, and they're doing a really nice job of like taking input on like that location, you know, every layout is very different. And then also taking in the voice of all of the stakeholders, including PTOs and parents. And then one of the nice thing that we're doing as like an add-on here is because we know PTOs are so generous and they always want to contribute something and they don't necessarily know like what's the best thing to do, we're putting together like a, hey PTO, should you want to contribute to the new playgrounds that you're building, here's a list of some great things that fit within our guiding principles. And then
Okay. Oh,
here's
that's
the
good.
same
That's a
thing with
great idea.
furniture. So like we were able to furnish all of these spaces. Here would be another great thing if you have an extra, you know, $20,000 or $2,000, right? You have a nice variety. So
When we did the
yeah.
media 2.0, it worked really, they kind of established kits and then the add-ons were.
And we have like, I know, like Carlene over at Bemis was like, I need that list as soon as possible. My PTO is like,
Yeah.
you know, like hammering down my door for it. So
Yeah.
that's one of the pieces that we're putting together so that principals feel like they can have a really nice understanding of what's an important piece to like enhance this program, so.
So we follow those guiding principles and not every building will look exactly the same.
Yeah.
So-
Thank you.
Anything else from me?
It's so fun.
Get out of here. Thank you. This is really fun. This is really well done. So,
Thanks, Marty.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Are we?
You're like,
We're
we're
done.
done. You're like, as soon as everybody gets out of here. Get out of here, get out of here.
Do you want to finish up or?
Yeah. What do we have? We've got one to go, right? Yeah, let's do it.
Why don't you highlight what's important
Yep.
for us to know?
So I'm also John Pagel this evening, John and Kendra. So obviously you've seen, in building capacity, this kind of woven through in terms of, each of the pillars. Obviously, writing professional development is kind of the vehicle to get to meeting all of our objectives. One of the things that we continue to do on a regular basis is provide job and better learning for all of our staff. That's something that takes place in each of our content areas, primarily the focus this year is in math. The other thing we have done is provided, again, it looks a bit different this year, but provided that parent learning opportunity with Celebrate Hope. That's going really well with John Ball and Lisa.
Is that underway right now? Or
What's that?
is that underway right now?
Yes,
or-
yeah, so they've had some sessions with our special ed parent group.
So what kind of, how many participants are we?
Well, we've had them for, I think we had about 20 at their virtual parent training series that they did. That was specific for parents of students with IEPs and 504s. And then Natalie and I are working with them to do a parent series around sense of belonging and for all parents. That would be open for all parents.
We
That's
had
fine.
about
Keep going.
200 parents show up to the managing conflict with your child. I have to bring in more seats and more.
That's
It's
okay.
not a joke.
The first step is acknowledging you need help, so.
So hopefully we'll do part two.
So apparently,
You might
parents
be
are
able
able to have the
Yeah.
resource, so that's a.
So I've never seen this. They all shared emails with
That's awesome though, because sometimes you need to commiserate, feel like it's not just you,
Is everyone- You're clearly on topic, okay, all right.
So also, we're utilizing our early release days to prioritize conversations around student learning at all the levels. Kendra has, thank you Kendra, by the way, for putting this presentation together with us and for her district newsletter that she's put forward as well. That's been really helpful to kind of showcase some of our events consistently throughout the district. Some of the challenges that, and recommendations, just kind of one slide, we're excited about having the continued partnership that's going on. Some of our retention strategies that we've shared with the district is, with our board rather, just being able to recruit and retain, and we want to make sure that we can do that. We've had a little bubble up with some of our certain groups, special ed primarily, just with teacher shortage and things like that. Continuing to build those quality partnerships, and we really want to make sure that we're pouring into our new staff as a retention strategy, honestly, to make sure that they're getting the opportunities to continue to grow and learn as a group.
We have some new leadership cohorts taking place this year. John has established a new administrator cohort for all of our new folks who are new to the
Position.
Admin.
Yep, for admin.
Yeah.
So they've had, then we're just running.
I've got 3 cohorts that I'm working with, new, somewhat new, just new to their positions, but been around a while, yes. We
So-
know all 3 of those groups.
On that, what is the, how is the recruitment for like bus drivers as well as the care class?
Well, we can talk about bus drivers if you want. It's not good.
Not good. We continue to struggle fully staffing a 3-tier system, and we were talking a little bit earlier tonight with one of the staffing for care continues to be a huge issue. We monitor that by the day, quite honestly, to figure out or to decide whether or not we can remain open.
How far down are we from where we want to be? Do you know how many positions we're shy?
No, it's by building. I don't know how.
If you had the number, I just.
Specific.
Don't worry about it.
But it.
We adjusted the wage rates for
I was
care.
gonna say, don't we have
We advertised in a multitude of different areas. A couple of you have shared, have you considered this, and you indicate. And so we're sharing those avenues to reach out to and advertise on as well.
So we have bumped rates, rates.
Yes, yeah, that adjustment has been made, so retention bonuses and so forth.
Okay.
Referral bonuses, retention bonuses and so forth. We're down about, what, 4 bus drivers right now? 4 or 5 bus drivers right now. But it just means that we're running real short staff.
Well, we have 8 standbys in our contract.
Okay.
8 standbys, so our daily routes are being covered, but we don't have the standbys. So it's a juggling act. I mean, when our manager and our first student on a daily basis are juggling.
Okay,
That's-
so last time you wanted to see Joy, so we're gonna start it. Any better smile? So Adam on Kendra's team put this together for us to really just be able to capture kind of the beginning, not beginning, but part of our journey as it relates to portrait. Do you have it up now? Never mind.
Yes, it's playing, I think it just needs a minute.
Oh, okay. And we wanted you to kind of end with the face of the kids who are ultimately here for, and I think that's an important aspect of our work.
That's why we are here at 11 o'clock.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, it says it's playing.
I know, I was gonna say.
Is this joyful?
I'm trying really hard here.
You can move if you have other.
There,
Is it trying?
something trying.
Okay.
Okay.
It's trying to do it.
Oh.
Over there. Oh, there's a red circle now. Even it wants to sleep.
Yeah.
It's like we can't load.
Close it out. Wi-Fi is off.
let's do that. We'll move on to other, we'll take the pressure off.
I don't have anything, I had one question, but it doesn't have to be answered now. There was some email about a homebound student, having a professional day or something, and that's brought up a question for me. How many homebound students do we have, and what exactly does that mean, and
Sarah, can
I can get that information for
Okay.
you, I don't have
It
it.
just, it
That's
what
fine,
it
we have a
means is the
spreadsheet.
student is unable to come to school for medical reasons. And, despite that, if they're able, we're able to provide homebound services, so sending a teacher to the home for some period of time during the week to help support their studies. It's not necessarily a teacher that's gonna instruct them so much as gonna be there to help organize their work for them, provide tutoring and so forth.
and what, we have a handful maybe?
Yeah, we have a handful. We have a homebound teacher that's in the special ed department, and then, however, we have at sometimes recruited the gen ed teacher of that student, and they've been helpful. They already have a relationship, so it's really nice for the student.
So they
And
go
always have a relationship.
after.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Was the video on?
No.
No,
Oh,
no,
was
this
it?
was-
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Keep going.
I
Yes,
know.
it wasn't
That's all right.
going. We'll keep going.
So some of my questions came up when I was at NASB, so the student voice was kind of answered. But to that, I was interested to know what the superintendent student advisory board does, so that doesn't need to be answered tonight, but Rich, if you could just next time tell us about that, that would be wonderful.
Sure.
One of the sessions I attended was talking about the free meals, and so the question that I had, again, it doesn't have to be answered now. For the elementary school students, the meals are delivered to the classroom. I don't know who would answer this question for me. The meals are delivered to the classroom, but for the middle school and high school students, they're available before school. So my question is, do all students who need it have actual access to it? So are they arriving with enough time that they can have meaningful access to the food? Some of the, I'm not sure, the middle school and high school buses, how close they get to bell time. Some districts, what they do is a second chance breakfast, and so between first and second hour, they've adjusted, the passing time, by some minutes, and they'll actually provide access to the food on like tables in the hallways. So I'm not saying that would work for us, but my question is, do the students have meaningful access to the free, breakfast that we
I can
provide?
tell you that the buses at Athens are there 20 minutes before school starts, so those kids have access if they choose to.
But, yeah.
Mine
But
is
if
not
you weren't-
are they taking it, but do they have meaningful access to it? And if not, what are we doing?
I thought what she was talking about, that the second breakfast shot is like there's a lot of the breakfast stuff is shelf stable anyway. It's like how much fun is it to leave it out or put it out, or know that there's certain places that'll still be there.
We'll put some together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
because we both thought that was kind of intriguing.
and then something that came up, with something that we dealt with, for TYA last month, a family that we were helping. Just to make sure that the resources within the district that are actually available, families know about, something like the Choice Center for Transition. And part of why I started thinking about this was because the web at Bolin, they just did a big food drive to stock the new location. And so, just to be mindful that we're actually making sure that we're getting information to families that they know that. Because I, as a parent, have, I don't know that I've seen and been made aware that there's a food pantry available. And, there might be people who are maybe not food reduced lunch, but who are somewhere on the cusp. Going forward, how we make sure that we.
Yeah, advertise those things. Actually, Narita is, if she were here, she'd be able to answer that. She's in charge of the food pantry. She's actually the student leader in charge of that. So she would be wanting to be able to give us some really good feedback as to exactly how that is working and how they're advertising that information.
Okay.
Because she works directly with them. That's something she's taken on.
Okay, in December.
Yep.
Yeah, and then, yes, that would be good.
Yep.
And she could maybe
I can
present
ask
that
Narita.
to us. Yeah, she could present that to us at the board meeting.
She'd love to do that.
Yeah, and then, in one of the sessions too, there was a mention of like resiliency centers, so, you know, I know Athens has a place where students can get clothes and things like that. I'm wondering if those same resources are made available in other locations throughout.
One example they used was a washer and dryer, and I know that was something when we bought TLC, there was a washer and dryer in the garage area, and at the time we were like, that's intriguing. A lot of these kids that come into TCC sometimes think they need to wash their clothes, they don't have options. But I don't remember whether we retained those machines or got rid of them, or whether that's something, I was gonna send a note to Angela and ask her whether that was something, but I thought that was part of their resiliency center, and I thought that was kind of for high schoolers trying to make it, you know, do we have those options? I thought it was an interesting one too.
That'd be a great question for.
Okay, yeah. I know, I'm rolling mine too. Play! Oh no.
It just doesn't want to
We just love doing experiments, and it's funner if you see how it's working, and like be the wind.
It's coming.
Great.
Understand. Dr. Harnish always includes like really fun activities to do, whether it's like watching a fun video that he created or doing a debate. If I'm just sitting down doing my work at a desk, it kind of seems boring and I get easily distracted. But if I'm moving around and I have something like more engageable to do, then I'm more focused and I can get more work done. This feels so new and fresh, and I love how Mr. Peterson is like trying to give us more experiments. I never thought I would touch a microscope like this old animation.
When it's like creative thinking, it helps us like learn in different ways by like planning and thinking out the steps to a project, and not just going ahead and just like following through something quick. It allows us like a deeper thinking and a deeper knowledge of like what we're trying to study and learn.
I got to talk to other people in my STEAM book club, and I got to talk about their perspective on the book that I'm also reading, which I really enjoyed. And I think just like learning as a whole, it's cool because we're able to understand why things work the way that they do. In history, we're able to connect like current events and why they're happening, what has led to the events that are happening today, how the past connects to the present. And I think overall, learning makes us more knowledgeable students, more knowledgeable citizens who can go off in the future and make better decisions for our communities and make the world a better place.
I can actually see what architects go through and what they have to do, because it just makes us understand more about what others have to go through in life.
I like working with people because people help the game seem fun.
All right, so the resiliency center. We'll ask about that.
That was a great video that speaks volumes. I have nothing to add further.
Okay.
Oh, I have so many things.
Is there any you could defer?
Yeah, there are some I will defer. Are our counselors fully staffed? I know we had people.
They are now.
They are now, okay.
Council, we decided.
Larson.
We had, Ann Young from who was at, Troy, who retired from Troy Young, who's filling in, and we just hired, Counselor Athens, and she started Monday.
Larson.
Larson, I'm sorry, started Monday.
And she started.
Today.
Okay, so did we split both counselors at Larson, or
Larson transitioned to different roles over the summer.
Okay.
They both transitioned before the start of the year. One stayed for 2 weeks, so it was for 2 weeks' notice, and she was there during the first 2 weeks of school. So we hired internally Andrea, I can't think of her last name, starts with a G, and it's not Gilovich, because that's Todd Gilovich. Andrea Garavanta, who is a social studies teacher at Larson, who's been wanting to become a counselor and moved out on her work to become a counselor, is one of the counselors there. And then our newest hire is Sana Mirza.
Okay.
Mirza.
So we did, okay. And then announcement wise, I've been asked to work with the library on some of their strategic planning, and so just talking about like ways that, like talking more consciously about ways that we partner with the library, because we do a lot of partnering with the library, but just kind of being more mindful about the ways that we do that. And then last weekend was the opening show of Wizard of Oz, but I wanted to highlight that like there's some TCC kids in Wizard of Oz, and so just the beauty of the, you know, seeing the schools work together is beautiful. And this weekend was fun at Athens because there was the theater, there was Science Olympiad, like there was still a lot happening, so it's, to be able to host Science Olympiad is a really big deal too. So that's all just good short stuff.
The building principal also was tree number 2 in the Wizard of Oz.
He was Father Tree.
Yes.
Yes, he was Father Tree on opening night and Father Tree today for the student matinee.
There was a student from Schroeder too.
Yes, there's a shooter from Schroeder and one from Schraden. No, not Schraden. 2 different elementary schools. There's 2 different elementary kids.
Were they munchkins?
They
Well, I'm trying to figure out what would they be?
Yeah, she's doing munchkins in an unusual way, but these 2 girls are munchkins, and one of them is also a flying munchkin. So
Okay. Dual role.
She has, the one girl has dual, and they're both Ozians as well. So they're on stage multiple times. They have costume changes.
Wow.
So one of them is the child of an Athens teacher, and then so maybe she doesn't go to school in this. I don't know. Anyway, there are 2 4th graders, some kids from TCC, but it was
That's
most,
fun. Yeah.
Glinda is a TCC student, and I just think that's really cool that like it's a named role and it's a TCC student, and seeing that partnership and seeing her flourish, being able to have the strength of what we're doing at TCC and what she needed for that, and to be able to be connected
Still
to kids at
participating,
Athens,
yeah.
and so like just that partnership has been really beautiful to see, and the way the kids are interacting. I think that's something worth celebrating.
And it might be good to think about that for future stuff too, to see how, during the dinner, we talked about, with the students, for them to maybe like,
The best
visit
finalize
each other, at their schools to see, to see what life is like.
Which is cool.
So, yeah.
I'm passing, I can defer my.
Well,
past my.
Okay. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm going to defer all my stuff. I do want to talk to you at some point. I went to a breakout with a woman from MDE who took us through the Michigan Merit curriculum and just demonstrated a level of flexibility in that curriculum that I don't think we're nearly taking advantage of here. And I think the conversation was, everybody in the room was going, what? I didn't know we could do that. What? And so I don't think we're unusual in that regard, but it certainly would suggest that our ability to reimagine high school, we have a greater ability to do that than I ever thought we could in terms of integration of subjects and double counting things, and and I'll give you one example that she gave, which is if you had 6 out of 7 of the personal finance standards were already covered in econ, and if you covered the 7th feature or 7th standard in econ, and you had your student take it as a senior, you could give them 2 credits for that half-year class, a half credit for econ, a half credit for personal finance, and 1 credit for the math experience for a senior. So the idea, if we're planning a personal finance class, I hope we're not, because it was, to me, it's like, let's figure out ways of being efficient so that our kids have ability to
Yeah,
really.
we're hoping to do what you just said.
Okay, all right. So.
There is a personal finance course though.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's not a new one for the.
But there were a number of other examples that she gave where it was like, okay, are we really taking advantage of that? So I can talk to you offline. And we'll look, because it was like, oh, we can do it, you know, possible. Okay, it's not good. Oh, I carried you home, Kim. Okay. Class dismissed. Thank